A ver si esto no se me cae, si esto no explota y si me funciona bien el... Uy, no, ok, sí se ve acá. La taberna de Kiki. Todo nice, todo correcto. Lo pienso minimizar. Ahora necesito mis referencias. ¿Están acá? No están. Ay, no, perdí la referencia de Macana. Estará más arribita. Ah, perdí la referencia de Magna. Es hora de imaginar con lo que... Ah, espera, lo tengo en disco. Soy A ver. Voy poniendo el videito.
Monster Hunter es lo mejor que me ha pasado en la vida. Y es que, ¿cómo no me iba a gustar? Es un juego sobre cazar dinosaurios, monstruos espectaculares, dragones. Bueno, a ver, eso también, pero a mí con los dragones y los dinosaurios ya me valía, ¿eh? No hay ninguna otra saga como Monster Hunter, con unas criaturas tan bien cuidadas, tan bien diseñadas e implementadas. Una de las razones por la que los diseños de Monster Hunter funcionan muy bien es por el increíble trabajo que hacen en integrarlos en una ecología y en una biología bastante currada. Realmente son tratados como animales y no monstruos, que tienen una anatomía plausible. Ojo, plausible no significa realista, que estamos hablando de bichos que escupen fuego y de otros que flotan porque tienen un órgano especial. Son animales con sus cadenas tróficas, con sus rutinas, sus comportamientos y su relación con el medio ambiente. Pero claro, llamar a los juegos...
¡Órale! Bienvenido, Stone Knife Guy. Bienvenido. Acá estoy dibujando un poco lo que es mi personaje de D&D, que me hicieron un pequeño reto y la verdad quiero cumplirlo. Pero mientras yo siempre dibujo con algo de fondo, usualmente música, pero ahorita estoy un poco inspirado en ver videos de Monster Hunter. Bienvenido y espero que lo pases bien. Vamos a estar viendo videos de Monster Hunter y D&D en general, así que para no aburrir el stream, la verdad soy alguien un poco muy callado, así que cualquier pregunta, pregunta con confianza. Pausar el video y hablaré del tema. Muy caliente hoy. Gema muy caliente. Muy bien. Bienvenute. Continuaré con el videito. Así que voy a ponerme a dibujar. También tengo un par de dibujos que terminar.
Believable Fantastic Animal Hunter, a nivel de marketing como que no va muy bien. Dentro del mundo de Monster Hunter existe la figura del gremio, que se encarga de regular la caza y la investigación de los monstruos para garantizar la seguridad del ecosistema. Esos que te piden que le aplastes el cráneo a toda una familia de animales inocentes, esos. Pero es por el bien de la naturaleza, ¿eh? Hay biólogos del gremio que están ahí plantando sus hierbas, seguramente fumándose otras porque mirad la cara de este señor. Y sobre todo investigando a los monstruos, investigando su anatomía y clasificándolos. Clasificándolos mal. Y me explico. La clasificación de estos juegos es una cosa bastante icónica. Todos los monstruos vienen asignados a un grupo. Wyvern volador, Leviatán, bestia de colmillos, wyvern de colmillos, dragón anciano. Según los biólogos de estos juegos, la gran mayoría de grupos tienen que ver con la evolución de estos animales, y todos los monstruos que están dentro de un mismo grupo están emparentados. Pero eso es mentira. Y claro, como Monster Hunter suele ser bastante fiel en pequeños detallitos a la biología, cuando tiene errores puede generar confusiones. Y no queremos confusiones, queremos entender de dónde ha evolucionado el Gipceros y por qué me odia. Para los que no sois fans de Monster Hunter, si no habéis salido corriendo ya, tomamos este vídeo como una clase de taxonomía básica. Bienvenidos chicos a mi primer vídeo con 2 visitas, va a ser increíble. Para saber qué grupos son válidos y cuáles no, primero tenemos que conocer cómo se clasifican los animales en la realidad. En nuestro mundo, el soso, el que no tiene alcinogre. Os presento al cladograma, el diagrama que nos va a contar todo lo que necesitamos saber sobre clasificación. También conocido como árbol filogenético, agrupa a todas las especies según su historia evolutiva. Cada una de las especies es un taxón, y los puntos que los unen se llaman nodos. Los nodos representan antepasados del resto de taxones. Por ejemplo, si cogemos el nodo que hay en la raíz del cladograma, cogemos al antepasado de todos los animales. Pero si cogemos este otro, cogemos a todos los animales y nos dejamos a este fuera. Y así sucesivamente. Los taxones que están más cerca entre sí son los que están más emparentados, y los que se alejan más, pues tienen menos que ver. Porque ojo, en un cladograma un animal no evoluciona en otro directamente, porque los nodos representan antecesores hipotéticos. En el lore de Monster Hunter, por ejemplo, existen las especies extintas, como el Wyvern Rex, el cual el gremio dice que es un antepasado directo del Tigrex. Esto en un cladograma no sería correcto, y se tendría que ver, en vez de así, así. Creo que así os vais haciendo más la idea, ¿verdad? Entonces, para que un grupo sea correcto biológicamente, tiene que ser un clado o grupo natural, que incluye al antecesor y a todos sus descendientes. Para poneros un ejemplo en el cladograma, los tetrápodos, los vertebrados de 4 patitas, somos un clado. Los dinosaurios también son un grupo natural, y los mamíferos también son un clado porque incluye al antecesor y a todos los que vienen después. En Monster Hunter hay muchos grupos que sí que están bien clasificados y son un grupo natural, como por ejemplo las bestias de colmillos, que son equivalentes a los mamíferos, o sea, tienen monos, jabalíes, mamuts. También están los Carapaceon, que son como crustáceos cangrejos, los Temnoceran, que son como arácnidos, y los Neopteron, que son como insectos. Hasta ahí todo bien. Muy buen trabajo, biólogos del gremio. El resto de grupos siguen estando mal, ¿eh? Cuando un grupo no es natural, tenemos dos opciones. Si un grupo viene de un mismo ancestro común, pero se deja fuera a parte de los descendientes, se considera un grupo parafilético, y no es válido. Los reptiles son un grupo parafilético porque sus descendientes, las aves, se quedan fuera. Los peces son una clasificación que no sirve, porque tienes a los peces y te dejas fuera a todos los vertebrados terrestres. Luego, si tu grupo viene de taxones que vienen de diferentes líneas evolutivas y que no comparten un antecesor común, se conoce como un grupo polifilético. Estos grupos se suelen generar por tener en cuenta convergencias evolutivas, estructuras o cosas que han desarrollado los animales de forma independiente y que les hace parecerse por casualidad. Dentro de las clasificaciones inválidas, esta es la más inválida de todas. No quieres que te salga un grupo así, jamás. Por ejemplo, los animales de sangre caliente, las aves y los mamíferos, son un grupo polifilético. Los animales con pico, pterosaurios y aves, en este cladograma son un grupo polifilético. Y el ejemplo más claro es el de las alas. Si nos fijamos en nuestro cladograma, hay animales que han evolucionado las alas de forma independiente 3 veces: los murciélagos, las aves y los pterosaurios. Las alas de las aves vienen de fusionar los dedos y sujetar el ala con plumas. El ala de los murciélagos viene de alargar los dígitos y unirlos con una membrana. Y la de los pterosaurios es un único dedo que se alarga muchísimo y que viene unido también por una membrana. Pero estos animales no tienen un ancestro que les haya dado esas alas, sino que la han evolucionado por su cuenta. Y diréis, Vaya tontería, Joan, es obvio que nadie haría grupos así. ¿Quién creéis que hace grupos así? Los biólogos de Monster Hunter, por supuesto. La categoría herbívoros es el claro ejemplo de un grupo polifilético. Porque aquí tenemos a un montón que son dinosaurios, a otro que es un leviatán, y a otros, o sea, el bulfango, el popo, anteca, el musgorrino. Este bicho se llama musgorrino. Me encantan estos juegos. Estos son más como las bestias de colmillos que habíamos visto antes. Tienen que estar emparentadas porque son mamíferos. De hecho, hay algunos de estos herbívoros que son individuos jóvenes de otros o bichos de la misma especie que otros que no son considerados herbívoros, sino bestias de colmillos. ¿Qué pasa? Que el gamoth y el diablos, que también comen plantas, no son herbívoros. ¿Os acordáis de lo que hemos estado hablando antes de las alas? Pues os presento a los wyvern voladores, que son un follón. Aquí entran todos los monstruos que tienen las extremidades delanteras transformadas en alas y dos patas traseras. Aquí entran el Rázalos o la Racian, por ejemplo. Pero claro, ¿realmente están emparentados todos estos animales por tener alas? Volvemos al ejemplo de antes. Si apareciese un murciélago en el mundo de Monster Hunter que hubiese evolucionado de las bestias de colmillos, ¿también sería considerado como wyvern volador? ¡Uy! Vaya, qué ironía, ¿no? ¿Qué haces tú aquí, Paulumu, con tus características mamiferoides y tu cuerpo de murciélago? ¡Qué casualidad! Se entiende lo que estoy intentando decir, ¿verdad? También dentro de los wyvern voladores están Acantor y Ucanlos. Pero diréis, estos no tienen alas, me estás engañando. Y se supone que estos bichos que ahora son cuadrúpedos
Ah,
descienden de unos wyvern voladores como el Tigrex que han ido perdiendo las alas de forma secundaria. Esto es un ejemplo de los de Monster Hunter queriendo hacerse los guays como diciendo, nosotros entendemos la biología evolutiva, no somos como otros juegos, nosotros molamos. Pues sí. Querer hacerse los guays es un poco también lo que ha pasado con los wyvern pájaro, que si os soy sincero son un poco 100% la razón por la que he querido hacer este vídeo. Este grupo incluye a monstruos que son un poco como raptores, pequeños dinosaurios terópodos como el Macao, el Yagi, el Kuluyaku, y a otros que son pues como wyvern, pero con características de pájaro, un pico, plumas, como el Yankutku, el Yangaruga, el Acnosom, el Malfestio. La pregunta más obvia aquí es, ¿qué hacen un puñado de dinosaurios en un grupo de pájaros? La respuesta es una de las cosas que me hicieron enamorarme perdidamente de Monster Hunter cuando me di cuenta. Porque las aves son dinosaurios. Y el grupo en el que se basan todos estos monstruos, los dromeosaurios, eran los dinosaurios más cercanamente emparentados con las aves. El problema es que el resto de wyvern pájaros no son pájaros. O sea, en Monster Hunter hay aves. De hecho, hemos visto un montón en la vida, en la fauna endémica. Esta que puedes capturar, ponértela en casa, que Monster Hunter Rise te da objetos. Aquí tenéis a uno que es literalmente un Archaeopteryx. Este es un pájaro normal. Y este pingüino le adoro y sacrificaría todas mis posesiones. Cuando escribí el guión no conocía a los bebés Sacred y ahora me parecen la mejor cosa que he visto en mi vida. Sí, solo he tenido a los bebés
parle
Secret
inglés,
durante un día y
of
medio, pero si les
course.
pasara cualquier cosa
I
os
speak
mataría a
English,
todos y
so
luego a mí
but
mismo.
I was my first language is Spanish. Oh man, top, welcome. I usually see my videos on English and Spanish, but I was interested in this one. Nice, so Italian also goes with Spanish. Yeah, yeah, they're like siblings languages. They are very similar, I think. I was drawing right now. Welcome to my streaming.
Luego están los colibríes de colorines de Monster Hunter Rise, que te suben la
Fuck,
estamina.
I didn't want to do that. I'm drawing my character. I know a bit of Italian. That's that's why I just guess you would know that I meant. Well, Spanish and Italian is not that complicated for me because I born on South America, so my first language is Spanish. No, South America Spanish. Yeah, I have. I'm not from Spain. Spain it's a lot more uh, elegant for putting some accusation on that. My Spanish is more dirty because uh, oh, we came from. Are you affiliated with? No, I'm not affiliated. Sadly, but I'm not mad about it. I just started again my streaming career. I was streaming before, but I got a lot of incidents that doesn't let me continue. I got problems with my studies. I got problems with money, and I didn't have time. But I have time now, and I'm coming back drawing. I still need to get good. I need to see what to do here. It's been a while since I draw. I want to get the basics here for my character. I love D&D, so I'm making my character. This here actually gets my bad. Are you affiliated with MS? What's that MS theory? Let me search it. What MS? What is MS theory? I didn't. I can't find it. If you can explain a bit, because I don't understand at all. Means Mara Salvatore. What's that? I'm not on MS theory. I don't know what you were talking about. This. I don't know what that means, but it's a big. Oh no, I'm not with the Maras. I'm not with that. I'm Maras is from El Salvador. Usually, they are like terrorists from their country, and they were spreading all over South America, and they wanted to go to North America. I'm not affiliated with them. MS theory. I'm I'm not from that Central America. I think that was that country. Yeah, the president Nayib Bukele incarcerated everyone from there, and he freed his country from them. Well, most of the part because there are a lot of gang members that are still out. I'm not one of them because I'm not from that country. I'm more to the south. But um, it's a double president Nayib Bukele. It's not bad. He did a lot for his country, but I don't know what else he's doing. I'm from more to the south, but I see all the things that he's doing, and at the moment, I'm not uh, talking about much him I think his country is better now, and more safer. But I don't know. El Salvador is very strange. I once made research about a country in the middle of America, Costa Rica. Yeah, seems a great country. Did you go there? No, I never went to Costa Rica. It's a lot of countries from the center. I'm from the south, very south, like Peru, Chile, Colombia, that type of countries. But I can say that Costa Rica is a good place to visit as a tourist. I never went there. Argentina then. Argentina, it's having a massive up economy thanks to their actual president. Argentina is a nice place to visit too, but well, usually before Milei entered the presidency, the studies were free and now they cost. So if you want to study on Argentina, right now you need to pay. It's not that bad, I think. If I can replicate this. Like this and that, and this and that, this. Yes, that's better. That's better. That's a lot better. But yeah. I remember you said something about you're not being able to stream to go to school. Yeah, I need to go to not school. I need to go to university. I got bad grades on the first part of the year, so I need to catch up. I was working, studying, and that affect my grades. I almost lost an entire semester thanks to my work, so I leave my work. My family was helping me now. What's the major? Oh, what's my career? I'm studying to be a software engineer. I'm drawing for fun. I play video games a lot, and I'm trying to make my career games. Well, I can put this for a moment, maybe to start. To get some ambience, like when oh, no wonder that you're following isn't software engineers. Like, yeah, it's the most hardest major, and I needed to focus myself on all the classes. I failed one or two classes, but I recovered on the second semester, and right now I'm on March 24. I'm starting my new semester. So right now I got some free time. I recover myself. Well, I got a luck in 100%, yeah. But a week, 3 weeks ago, I got bite by a dog with rabies. So I was off streaming, playing video games, being myself. I was asleep all the time thanks to the vaccines from the rabies. I was, I passed a dark path in my life on these 3 weeks, but I'm feeling better, and I got the motivation to start streaming again. How the fuck did you manage to get me? Well, it was a funny story. I was walking on the street, and then this dog was on his house. He came to me, bite me, and then went to his house again. I I felt bad for myself. My legs start um, feeling pain, a lot of pain. No, it was not a pit bull. It was a mix of races. It was small, but it was very mad. I don't know why. My leg was there, and the dog bite it. I got my fourth shot. So yeah, yeah, I walked to the owner, explained the situation. He took me to the medical center, and he paid for all my vaccines. I got my last one on the 21, so I may be a bit low until that time. I mean, I feel bad. I don't feel 100%, but I'm feeling more like myself now. Yesterday I got my first shot and I was sleeping all day. Today I got a bit more energy, so I wanted to try new things, drawing, uh, streaming again. Did you bite anyone? Well, you know, no. I recluse myself on my room, like always. Even I didn't have the hydrophobic part. If I got the hydrophobic part from the rabies, I would be dead. Like, yes, 100% dead. Ah, but I was not allowed to go outside on that time, just for safety for others. Yep, I need to be more careful with myself. The way you're alive. Well, alive is not bad if you manage to see all the good things in it. I mean, me personally, I'm kicking that dog before he bites me. No, well, I should have, but I didn't see the dog coming. He, he was like a ninja and he bite me and run away. I didn't have a chance. I would bite it or kick it at least. You should have beaten his brother rather. Maybe, maybe. I should. Yeah, I should. I should have done that. But well, anyways, where are you drawing? Oh, I'm drawing my character from the a D&D campaign. He was a gnome, so I think I can put this on the screen if I think if I do this one. You can see it there. Can make it smaller. This is my reference. This is my character from D&D. I love him, but it's hard to draw. I made to do the hair. Like this is the one. What is that? It's a gnome from World of Warcraft. I made it my character from D&D, so I need to be. I need to draw it for. I got a challenge from a friend once to draw it, but I needed to do it first. Like this. Having this in mind. This one coming out. I hate drawing her. It's not my forte. Not my strong drawing skills. I want to learn to draw to make character like. Well, I was more methodical making my character. I started doing the character on paper, like writing it, because I love to write characters on D&D. And I got it, and the entire personality, their traits, how I want him to be in the world on paper. Then I search a game that allows you to personalize your character, in this case World of Warcraft. I mean, like drawing general. Well, my way of starting drawing was I saw my brother doing it. I wanted to be like him, so I start doing it. I start drawing first, copying, not exact copy, but drawing a similar art style. I start with Dragon Ball Z. I stop frames from the battles and start drawing that, copying the poses, copying the faces. And then I got accustomed to start making my own poses. I was 1 month, no, 2 months studying anatomy. I started drawing a lot of poses in general. If you want to draw backgrounds, you need to search objects in general. You need to search perspective. If you like drawing characters or persons in general, you should see a bit of anatomy, and then break it to your liking. As you can see, I'm not the best one. I got the form, but I don't have the skill at all. But I want to draw, so I kept drawing and drawing. I'm making my sketches. And this one not. And if you like something, you become passionate about it, and you didn't stop until you see that what you're doing is what you like. I'm a perfectionist, so I keep drawing and drawing and drawing until I reach my favorite drawing, my base of what I want to do. Like this. If I don't like it, I redo it. That's the way I do it. And this one, let's come to here. If you want to start with something, pick a topic, pick a game, pick a story, and start doing it. The only limit is your imagination. And the only who can stop you is yourself. If you have potential, you don't need to stop. You need to keep doing it. I don't have the potential at all, but I keep doing it until it's perfect for me. Like this part, the hair. If I see it in generals, I saw that this one is a big line, goes to the center. This one is more large. Need to redo it. Usually, if I don't like it, I draw on top of that. Keep drawing until I reach what I like, and then I use a new cape to use another to make it clean. I want to draw this with the pencil. Do you know how to do that? Yeah, with pencil is more easy. I am a traditional artist, so drawing digital is a bit new for me. When you start on paper, you go for circles, squares, try to do a little bit of perspective, do anatomy, do like this. When I say anatomy, I search a pose online and try to replicate it. If I saw someone with his arm up, I found the pose and I start drawing base things, base forms, and you start doing the body, raise their arm, make maybe a fist. Now you have here the arm here, maybe a shield covering this so you don't see the rest of the arm. Now you have maybe it's going. What was perfecting? Oh yeah, this is perspective. Let me show you. You have a point here. This. If you draw one square here, you need to see that let's draw a square here. Okay. Here, going to this point. Here. Square is going to have less. Let's use less. Here. This one. Here. You see how the dots connect to make a square here? This is more bigger and this is more shorter. That's because the picture is blocking. Oh, sorry. Here. I think you can see there. Yep. This is perspective. The big square, or rectangle in this case, it's big because it's more like near to you, and this one, this is the back of the rectangle. It's more small because it's more going to the point of center. This point of here is the like an infinite corridor, the last part, the very small part. So what this make it's if I draw a punch here or even an arm, you're going to see that the people here is shorter, but the way they come closer to this, their arm gets bigger and bigger. That's happened to let me search here. This one. But I need to make it bigger. How do I make it bigger? Yeah, this is part. This one. Everything go to one point. How do you do that with a ball? That's a good point. One point perspective drawing, ball. Like this. There are three perspective points, I think, here. Oh yeah, here. Because the ball, it's a sphere. Oh, it's for you, aren't you? Oh, don't worry. Thanks for coming, and to be honest, it's good to talk to you. But you can see here better, I think. Let me show you this fast. This. The ball doesn't change at all because the form doesn't affect the perspective of the ball. Well, old man in top, thank you for coming. I'm going to keep drawing, and I'm very happy to have you here. Take care. Good night. Let me start with this.
It is an average day in this small border town. Merchants peddle their wares, guards keep watch at the gate. People go about their business. But lurking deep beneath the surface, a great evil festers and grows. A pulsating mass of formless white flesh awakens. From this conglomeration of meat, a neck begins to sprout, and then a head. Its pale face is featureless, aside from a gaping maw and two empty, wet holes to act as eyes. Eyes which now open for the first time. It worms its way to the surface, emerging through the town's cobbled streets. Taking a deep breath of the fresh air above for the first time, the creature begins to sing. Welcome to Monster of the Week. This week, we'll be taking a look at a creature that has been requested time and time again, but for good reason. Many of you have likely heard tales of the false Hydra, despicable as they are. My goal today, as always, is to approach the subject of this creature assuming nothing. We're going to go over its origins, its in-game lore, and of course some plot hooks along with some practical encounter design ideas. Whether you're a dungeon master or not, I suggest you settle in because things are about to get wild. The false Hydra is unique among the monsters I've covered on this channel in that you won't find it among the pages of any RPG monster book. This creature was born as a homebrew monstrous creation. It first appeared on the Goblin Punch blog in 2014. The creator of the False Hydra merely posited this monster as a concept. There were no stats, and the artwork provided was mostly depictions of Dead Hand from The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. These images were meant to serve as a visual aid since they're kind of the closest thing in media to the False Hydra's description, which is horrifying. The entire blog post is basically a description of the monster, a complete guide to its life cycle, and how it might be used as a D&D monster for your adventuring party to go up against. Now, the False Hydra became a sort of internet sensation within the D&D sphere online. Over time, its reputation as a highly unique and disturbing monster caused its popularity to surge. But the vague nature of this monster's creation left a lot of us wondering, what exactly is a False Hydra? These creatures get their start as aberrant mounds of flesh, which seem to spawn over time underground as a result of rampant falsehoods and lies. At least, that's everyone's best guess. See, the truth is that nobody is really certain of the creature's origin due to its elusive nature. But of course, as dungeon masters and storytellers, we have a little bit of insight into the world that most of its residents don't have. See, once this little mound of white flesh has grown large enough, about the size of a human torso, it sprouts a head, which is attached via a long, skinny neck. This head looks similar to that of a man, except its eyes are empty, wet holes, and its jaw distends in a way that is just simply wrong. The False Hydra, now newly born with an appetite for sentient meat, begins to burrow upwards, towards the surface, towards the town above. It might emerge in the center of a busy street, or perhaps in the city's sewer system. Maybe it even pops up in the pantry of a local tavern. Wherever its head emerges, like a periscope, it begins to take in its surroundings and get an idea of exactly where it is. For this place will ultimately become the False Hydra's hunting ground. The second thing that happens after the False Hydra's uncannily human head emerges from the soil is that the False Hydra begins to sing a horrid song. This song can be heard for 5 miles in all directions, and all creatures that can hear it are forced to ignore the False Hydra. I'm sure some of you are thinking they're forced to ignore the False Hydra. What the hell does that mean? And what that means is that the False Hydra is imperceptible to them. This doesn't make the False Hydra truly invisible, but rather it becomes imperceivable. The song worms its way into the minds of those who hear it and creates gaps in their attention. It is within those gaps that the False Hydra finds its home. While under the effects of this song, you could be face to face with a False Hydra, its empty eyes staring directly back into yours, and you would have no idea that it was even there. Your brain simply ignores its presence, forced to discard all information that tells you the False Hydra is right in front of you, making it impossible to comprehend. The most sinister part of all this is that anyone under the effects of the False Hydra's spell doesn't even know it. An entire town will just keep going about their business, all while the False Hydra is watching them and planning its next move. Now, this uncanny ability to trick the brains of most people into ignoring the False Hydra is not without its flaws. For instance, when it finally decides to claim its first victim, it must stop singing in order to eat, because of course this thing eats people. I mean, if it didn't do that, what would be the point? The False Hydra might lash out at a lone wanderer in a back alley somewhere and then drag their corpse into a sewer below where it can safely consume its first meal. During this time, the False Hydra is exposed. The victim, of course, will have an up-close and personal view of the False Hydra, but any onlookers will also get a chance to see it if the False Hydra isn't careful. For the sake of our collective education, let's say that on this dark and dreary night when the false Hydra claims that first victim, somebody did see it happen. The false Hydra was careful, but someone across the street who happened to be peering through a pair of curtains saw the whole thing happen. They'd likely be thrown into a panic. After all, they just witnessed somebody being dragged away by a terrible monster. This is true, of course, but once the false Hydra has had a chance to finish eating and it can resume singing its song, that person, the eyewitness who just saw the false Hydra, will not only become unable to perceive it again, it will forget that it saw the creature altogether. See, the false Hydra's song is so much more than simple camouflage. It prevents the victim's mind from even recalling memories of the false Hydra, but it gets even more sinister. Let's say this time the false Hydra decides to pull the local priest into its lair and dine on his flesh. Even if nobody saw the false Hydra, people will still notice that the priest is gone, right? And this is the true strength of the false Hydra's dirge. When it consumes someone, that individual becomes known to the false Hydra, and its song will now remove all memory of that individual from all who hear it. Once our priest has been consumed, as far as the people in town are concerned, the priest never existed. But part of the problem still remains. See, now there's a church with no priest, and that simply doesn't add up. To the people of the town, these gaps in logic will soon be filled by some bizarre explanation of their own creation. They'll say, oh, we had a priest, but he's gone to the capital to treat those sick with the plague. Or the main branch of our local faith simply hasn't sent a priest out to tend to this church yet. This phenomenon becomes even stranger when we look at personal relationships in this context. A house of children whose parents have been eaten by the false Hydra will confabulate memories about being orphans who have always lived on their own. A local man whose wife has been eaten by the false Hydra might sit and wonder why his closet is full of women's clothes. He might try to explain this away using some sort of logical leap, or simply discard the clothes, recognizing that there's something inherently wrong about them. All of these little inconsistencies will mount on top of one another and add up pretty quickly. The more people the false Hydra consumes, the more gaps in logic the population will have to rationalize. This begins to manifest as paranoia, distortions of memory, slipping sanity, and eventually madness. All the while, the false Hydra grows fat. It consumes and consumes, eventually growing more heads that bear a faint resemblance to some of its victims. As it eats, it becomes stronger, more powerful, and bolder in its tactics. Now with multiple heads, it is able to quickly grab people in broad daylight in a voracious effort to consume them as fast as possible, and then resume singing so that anyone who witnessed this horrible event transpire directly in front of them will simply be returned to their docile and ignorant state. But the thing is, these memories of horror seen, along with the memories of the people taken by the false Hydra, are still there. They've simply been repressed deeply. And it's in those deep recesses of your mind that you're still aware the false Hydra is present and the threat that it poses, even if your conscious mind isn't. Now this can manifest in so many different ways. Those under the effects of the song might have dreams of horrid chanting sung by pale faces at the window. Or they might wake to find a note scrawled at their bedside which they don't really remember writing. Upon closer inspection, it seems to be a warning that they're being watched, and it's definitely in their handwriting. But as the false Hydra matures, things somehow get even worse. Once it feels secure enough in its strength and abilities, the heads will erupt from the ground and now soar over the rooftops. From here, it will devour everything until its appetite is satiated. Spoiler alert, its appetite is never satiated. And it's at this point the false Hydra shifts gears. It no longer needs to be careful and stealthy. It's become truly monstrous in size and strength. so it begins to sing a new song. This new song, much like the last one, affects all creatures within a 5-mile radius. However, rather than making them ignorant to the false Hydra's presence, this song is basically a radio broadcast of dominate person. Unlike the first song, everyone gets a saving throw to resist the effects of the domination. However, most will fail, and those who are able to resist the effects will be quickly rounded up and consumed by the false Hydra. The false Hydra, however, now finds itself in a bit of a predicament. It has grown incredibly strong. However, it also now needs to consume life on a huge scale in order to survive. 1 or 2 humanoid creatures a day is no longer going to suffice. So what does it do? Well, it will now order its mentally enslaved thralls to carry it to the next town where it can consume everything and everyone there. This process will perpetuate itself until the false Hydra is either destroyed or it simply consumes its entire food supply and withers away. It is a certainty that it will eventually eat itself into extinction if it is not stopped. The only question is, to what extent will the damage be? How much destruction must the realm suffer? And how much life is lost while the Hydra gorges on everything in sight? If caught early enough and dealt with, this might be an interesting footnote for the historians in an otherwise sleepy town's history. If left unchecked and allowed to fester, this could mean the erasure of an entire continent. If this sounds like a monster with nearly unlimited potential for plot hooks and storytelling, it is. The false Hydra is a grotesque creature that employs unsettling tactics, and I think that's why it's gained so much attention over the years. For any of you who are actually hoping to use this monster in a D&D campaign, I'm sure the next thing on your mind is, what would this thing's stat block even look like? So to answer that question, I took to the internet.
On your mark, get set. We're riding on the internet, cyberspace, set free. Hello, virtual reality.
Now, there are countless homebrew conversions of the false Hydra out there, but there are 2 that have received a fair amount of attention. One of them is posted on D&D Beyond in the homebrew monsters section. This stat block has a staggering 74,436 views as of the time of this recording, so I suppose those numbers kind of speak for themselves. And the other popular stat block I found is on the DM's Guild, where it's been put up as a pay-what-you-want PDF product. Part of the reason I put off doing a video about the false Hydra for so long is because I knew the 5e stats for this thing already existed in multiple forms, and a big part of Monster of the Week and what I do here is of course converting those old monsters into 5th edition. It's the reason I don't cover monsters on the show that are already in 5e. But I had never actually looked at these stat blocks, and I gotta be honest, I was a little bit underwhelmed by what I saw. So rather than just linking to those stat blocks, I did what I do, and I took my best crack at decoding this creature's information into a usable stat block that also tries to maintain the spirit of the original creature from the blog post. Now, I'm not gonna pretend that my version of this monster is the be-all, end-all false Hydra stat block, but I am happy to at least provide it as an option to you to do with as you please. I'll leave a link in the description below to my conversion of the stat block, as well as the other 2 that I mentioned, so you can kind of check them all out and see what you think. Now, if you'll join me on this journey of codifying the false Hydra, I'll explain why I did what I did with the stat block, and you can let me know what you think in the comments. Feel free to hit me with some of your stat block ideas or what you might change or do differently, because I'm gonna be honest with you, converting this thing was pretty tough. Also, if you have found this video interesting thus far, please consider dropping a like, leaving a comment, all that stuff helps me out tremendously. Now, plug those ears with wax if you can, because it is time for... While trying to make stats for this monster, I had a few objectives I knew we needed to accomplish. For one, we need to preserve the monster's creep factor. 2, we need this monster to be a legitimate threat, but we don't want it to be overpowered or so strong that the players can't do
anything against it. And 3, we need this monster stat block to properly represent its chaotic nature and the fact that it grows both physically in size and in power as it consumes. So the first thing we're going to look at is its actions. In terms of what actions it has, it was pretty easy to nail that down. It can bite stuff and it can sing. The bites are super easy to figure out, but the song is what was going to be a little bit tricky. I ended up landing on a version of the song that is worded in such a way to make it so it causes the charmed condition, and that everyone who is charmed by this song is forced to ignore the Hydra and can't perceive it and all that good stuff. The reason I went down this path is because I still want things like Mind Blank to be effective at keeping the false Hydra's abilities in check. I also specified that the song only affects creatures that can hear it because that just makes sense to me, and also it means that anyone who can't hear the song, either because they just can't hear or because they're stuffing their ears with wax or whatever, can have a chance to resist the false Hydra's droning
Okay, let's
call.
separate
This also sets up some pretty dramatic uses of the silence spell, which I think is really neat. Just imagine casting silence, and as all sound fades, the party is able to suddenly see the Hydra's heads towering above the city. The best part is, nobody will even hear them screaming because they're in a zone of silence, and once the silence disperses, they won't even remember what they saw. Now, of course, the players will know, but this is a great chance for them to use metagame knowledge in a really fun way. Being able to metagame about what's actually going on, but in character, as if their characters are having these paranoid outbursts and moments of clarity, can be really fun, especially if you have players who love to roleplay. The next thing on my list of stuff I wanted to do was properly representing the false Hydra's life cycle. How do we get from a little lump of flesh with a single head sprouting from it to a multi-headed terror that is scooping up entire towns in its gullet, all on one stat block? My answer to that problem is to have 2 stat blocks. The first stat block is simply the false Hydra as it starts. It's this small aberration, but as it consumes more and more people, it grows to be huge. On the stat block, I included a table that indicates how many creatures the false Hydra has to eat before growing another head, and every time it grows a head, it gains more hit points and its size increases. Eventually, when it has 7 heads, after taking a long rest, it becomes a mature false Hydra, which is where we go to stat block number 2. This stat block is a more true representation of the gargantuan monster threat that the false Hydra can be if it grows completely unchecked. The rest of what's on there is mostly a combination of standard attack actions that it can take, along with a few legendary actions to actually make it function in combat, and a lot of defining text for its big song abilities that explain how they work. So definitely let me know what you think. As I mentioned, everything's linked down there. So now I'm hoping we have a good understanding of what the false Hydra does and what it wants to do, because I think it's about time we moved along and talked about a few. There are so many little details about the false Hydra you can latch onto when crafting a story using this monster. For instance, it's thought that the false Hydra manifests due to lies and rampant falsehoods. What kind of place, then, is it most likely to crop up in? Perhaps a kingdom where the ruler is using dogmatic propaganda to keep the people in line. If the players are in the city when these strange events start taking place, perhaps the nature of their social environment is a subtle clue as to what's happening. The king, who is maybe aware of the threat, might be going mad trying to solve the problem of the false Hydra while also keeping it covered up as to not start a panic, and also avoid the blame of the creature spawning in their kingdom. If that method of genesis isn't appealing to you though, maybe the false Hydra comes from another world. It is most certainly an aberration, so having the false Hydra hail from the Far Realm or even Carceri might be a good option. Perhaps your players even find it on some foreign plane and bring it back with them on their journey, not realizing what they hold is a catastrophic threat simply biding its time. It could also be the result of a mad wizard's experiment, who knows? You don't even really need to have a reason that this thing appears. It might simply just be a thing that was laying dormant in the earth and for whatever reason chose this Wednesday to pop up in town. I do, however, feel like the most compelling way to use this monster is by having the players venture into a town where the false Hydra has already begun to spread its tendrils into society. But it's not too late yet. It could be by pure happenstance that the players stumble into this false Hydra-infested town, but something the original blog post mentioned that I thought was a really good idea is using a letter to bait the players in. They could receive a correspondence from an old friend or past patron, which is pretty benign for the most part, but jammed smack dab in the middle of this note, written in the hand of a madman, is the following sentence. I saw it eat them. You have to help me. I saw it eat them, but I can't remember. If you can actually make a handout that your players can read on their own, even better. Then when the party arrives in town to help out their friend, this friend doesn't seem to remember writing them the letter at all, let alone putting that sentence in it. This should definitely inform your players that something is amiss and that something is definitely up. Thus, the adventure can begin. The real question is, though, once the players know something is amiss and they actually start investigating, how are they ever supposed to do anything if they forget what they know about the false Hydra as soon as it starts singing? If they're able to catch it in the act of killing someone or trap it in some way and they can kill it before it gets a chance to start singing again, that's probably their most reliable option. But that's a very unlikely circumstance to come about just organically, so first off, I would suggest you give your players a few clues. If you want it to be a little bit easier to find, maybe the false Hydra is visible in mirrors, or maybe it can be seen by some animals and they act strangely when the false Hydra is near. I can imagine a druid or ranger in the party casting speak with animals to one of the local fauna, and that creature is just terrified of this big white thing that it's seen, and it's very confused about why none of the people seem to care or notice it. Something also to keep in mind is that the more time the players spend under the influence of the Hydra's song, the more opportunities you as the DM will have to feed them clues. Their subconscious might leave them notes that they don't remember writing. They might have bizarre dreams or moments of clarity as they go about their day while their subconscious rebels against the false Hydra's influence. You can kind of do whatever you want here, and whatever you come up with, really, the sky is the limit. If your players are sort of floundering and don't really know what to do or how to progress the story, this is a great chance for you to just give them a very obvious piece of information so as to nudge them in the right direction without necessarily spelling it out for them entirely. The most important thing for them to figure out, though, is once they realize blocking out the Hydra's song by deafening themselves in some way is the key, they should be able to take it from there. Perhaps they even find someone in town who's not able to hear and has simply been hiding from the Hydra the entire time or just playing along. If you have a character in your party who speaks sign language and might be able to communicate with this individual, awesome. If not, this is a really good opportunity to have this NPC pass the player's notes. And I would suggest you use real written notes if you're playing in person. And these pieces of parchment should tell the players what this NPC has seen. And I'm sure the text upon those notes will be very, very unsettling. If the party fails to stop the false Hydra before it matures into its gargantuan form, then the narrative is going to shift a little bit here. For one, as the Hydra attempts to dominate everybody with this secondary song, they have to pass that initial saving throw, and even if they do pass it or are otherwise able to resist the effects, they're now surrounded by a populace that wants to kill them. Just escaping the town with their lives intact might be a challenge in and of itself. But let's say they do manage to escape. Then what? Now there is a gargantuan monstrosity on the prowl, heading to the nearest populated city to cause destruction and mayhem on a huge scale. What do? The players might try to beat the false Hydra there. After all, they can probably travel faster than this thing being dragged by an entire populace of enslaved citizens. And if they get there with enough time, maybe they can warn this other city and start an evacuation effort. To make this a little bit more interesting and engaging for them, maybe they're tasked with guarding an important NPC, such as the local ruler or baron or something like that, and they have to escort them out of the city while it is being abandoned. Something else really important to consider here is that during times of crisis, there are always going to be those who wish to capitalize on the despair. An entire city fleeing into the countryside.
Perdonen. Hi, welcome. Sorry for not pressing a lot of attention. I was drawing, and I guess I'm a lot of immersed here. I want to make this perfect, but it's not possible at all. Welcome here. I'm just streaming for for my own sanity. I'm just having some fun on D&D, and here I'm going back to D&D. Sorry.
With all of their valuables is going to make a prime group of targets for banditry. The party might have to fend off groups of aggressive bandits, or maybe they have to ride ahead and negotiate asylum for all these refugees fleeing from the False Hydra in the next city over. If you want to make this really spicy, maybe all these people are fleeing to another kingdom that kingdom is at war with, and they have to try to negotiate a situation where the two kingdoms can work together. Maybe they even devise a scheme in cooperation with the king's army to take down the False Hydra. There are just so many possibilities, and this is a great chance to give your players an opportunity to do a bit of creative problem solving for a very, 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 very troublesome problem. I think that ultimately the False Hydra holds a very special place in the tabletop community, and I've had so much fun just discussing it and researching it. As I said, my stat block for this monster is linked in the description below in the form of a Google document which contains everything you need to run this monster. However, also as my way of saying thank you to all you lovely patrons out there on Patreon, you can find the 5th edition Monster Manual style stat block with some extra art and lore and rolling random tables and that kind of stuff. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention our patron of the week. This week, our lucky randomly selected patron is Dominic Kuda. Thanks for your support, my friend, Kuda Best. And thank you for watching. I appreciate you guys showing up every week, and I hope that the False Hydra finds a special place for you at your D&D table. Until next time.
Ooh, nice. Let me search for something to see. I don't know. Maybe this. Let's see.
Hello
this.
gamers, what is going on? I am running on 5 hours sleep, 2 cups of coffee, and a dream, but I refuse to let recording this video be pushed back any further because I have been sitting on it for a very long time. We're talking about icebergs today, specifically a Monster Hunter iceberg, and if you don't know what an iceberg is, it's pretty much just a deep dive on a particular topic, starting at the top with theories and things that people know a lot about, and slowly working your way down the tier until you get to things that nobody has any idea about whatsoever, even me in some circumstances, but we'll get there, just hang in there. There are a few Monster Hunter icebergs floating around out there, but the one we're using today was originally posted by Randizer Draken 3 years ago on the Monster Hunter Reddit. It was the most reasonably sized one I could find without being too small or too big. There is one that would take hours, the video would be hours long, which we can dive into if you guys really want me to, but it's going to take a little while. And if there's a more recent one, please let me know, and I'll dive into that one as well. So we've got a lot of things to go through today, a lot of different Monster Hunter topics, a lot of tiers with a lot of entries, so we're just going to get into it, I think. Sound good? Good. All right, let's do it. The Monster Hunter Iceberg, starting with Tier 1, and our first entry is...
Ooh.
To kick things off, we have a classic in the new age of Monster Hunter, and a great example of how some theories are just fun and spread like wildfire once they start. Sharish Valda looks at the player, or more accurately, the camera. This is a theory that Sharish Valda was programmed and designed to have its eyes sort of always looking directly at you, the player, the real life person. Whilst it's fun and imaginative, I am almost certain it isn't actually the case. In fact, I recall a recent thread that had a breakdown of how Sharish Valda's model works and how it was designed, and it allows for that sort of optical illusion to take place. It's still a fun idea though. I really like it, and it's a totally harmless one, so keep on keeping on with it. This is pretty explicitly said in Nergigante's whole thing is that he comes through and he takes out any excess Elder Dragons that make it across in the Elder Crossing, and he brings balance to the force, or ecology, or something. That's pretty much it. All right, we're going to put these next two together, the Lagiacrus skeleton issues and the prototype ancient forest, because they go kind of hand in hand, I'd say, because without one, most people probably would not have even questioned the other one. The prototype ancient forest was shown to us in a video shortly after World's release, and it gives us an early concept of an Anjanath just relentlessly chasing a hunter through the forest. A lot of these concepts remain in the final game, but there is even more emphasis on this sort of evading and getting away from the monster than we eventually got in the final product. At the end of the video, those who have seen it will remember that the hunter and the Anjanath plummet down the waterfall, and the Anjanath is just promptly absolutely destroyed by a Lagiacrus, which shows us that Lagiacrus was fully intended to be in the final game. However, you may notice that it's not even in Iceborne, it's not there at all. And that's where the Lagiacrus skeleton issues come in. It was stated by the devs prior to Sunbreak coming out, Monster Hunter Rise's expansion, that the issue was that the monsters, specifically the really large, really low to the ground Leviathans, are too big, too long, and always have a part of their body dragging along the ground, that it's just a physics nightmare to try and accurately animate them and get them to work within the Monster Hunter physics engine. I hope that they fix this in the future, because they got things like Almudron and Mizutsune working pretty well. So, I don't know, just make Lagiacrus more upright, I think is the solution. But anyway, moving on. This is the third, or technically the fourth entry in the Portable Monster Hunter series, and was only ever released in Japan, unfortunately. Despite that, it does remain a fan favorite, and somehow managed to be the third best-selling PlayStation Portable game of all time, worldwide, which is just crazy. It's also the first time we see Series Golden Child and everybody's favorite wolf dragon, Sonoga, along with a few other monsters you're probably familiar with, like Arzuros, Nibblesnarf, and Amatsu. Fun fact, this is the only game I've ever imported to play, despite the fact that I don't know a lick of Japanese. Alright, we're into Tier 2. All of these are still going to be pretty well known, I think, and we'll start with a good one, Monster Hunter Frontier. Monster Hunter Frontier was truly the MMO RPG Monster Hunter game of your dreams. It was built upon the Monster Hunter DOS engine, only available in a handful of countries in Asia, and its servers ran from 2007 through till 2019, when it was unfortunately shut down. Not to be deterred though, the fandom has ensured that it continues to this day, and as such, it does remain playable. It featured a staggeringly high amount of monsters, and even several unique weapons, most of which have never and may never be seen ever again, unfortunately. Espinas did make it out of Monster Hunter Frontier though, so who's to say what we'll see in the future? Monster Hunter Online was MMO number 2 for the series. It released only in China, and it ran from 2013 through till 2019. It was developed on the Crytek engine, and so was our first look at Monster Hunter with fancy graphics. Boasting its own slew of unique monsters, it was a shake-up for the series for sure, but didn't quite have the staying power that Frontier did. Dundorma is the main town in the online portion of Monster Hunter DOS, and reappears in the latter half of Monster Hunter 4U, if you'll remember. It also features as a quest location known as The Town in Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, and is just always getting completely annihilated by Elder Dragons. I don't know why you'd live there. Why this is up for debate. It could be that it's near Castle Trade, which is where Fatalis is supposed to be. It could just be that it's in a really bad location, like how some people live under flight paths in the real world. I don't know why people live in Dundorma. There is way more on the wiki about the ancient civilization than I thought there would be, and I honestly don't know if it's fanfiction or confirmed canon, but I'm rolling with it. I'm gonna go with it. Long story short, there is evidence throughout the Monster Hunter lore that a long-ass time ago, a civilization existed that was more advanced than the current civilization in the Monster Hunter universe that we, the players, see for the most part. The main evidence is there's ruins everywhere. They can be found throughout various maps, particularly the Tower and the Forlorn Arena. The people of this ancient culture had a close connection with monsters that resulted in them utilizing them for different means, and they weren't necessarily good means, I'm afraid. We'll come back to this topic a few times in this iceberg as we get deeper and deeper, but TLDR, they pulled an Icarus, flew too close to the sun, and made some bad decisions, which resulted in the civilization collapsing. Which, damn, if that isn't ironic to what's going on right now in the real world. Monster Hunter Explore was a mobile game released only in Japan, and Canada for some reason. It was active from 2015 till 2020 before the service was shut down. It featured like every single monster ever and saw the player traveling to a wide array of islands to hunt them. It also had an absolutely bonkers amount of crossover quests. We're talking things like Evangelion Brachydios, Attack on Titan Devil Joe. Yeah, if you've seen them and ones like them, they came from Monster Hunter Explore. Yeah. Alright, time to do some time traveling. Way back in 2006, Monster Hunter 2 came out as, you guessed it, a Japanese exclusive, unfortunately, and it brought with it a bunch of new features. One such feature, which we haven't seen since, was the Versus mode, where two hunters would each bring a monster into the arena, and the goal was to successfully defeat the enemy's monster before they defeated yours. Pretty cool concept, I'd say. You could name the monsters and send them into a rage mode with a horn and do all kinds of things like that. It was pretty neat, and it'd be a fun thing to see come back at some point. But I guess they kind of already did that with Monster Hunter Stories, so maybe we will not see this ever again. Yeah. Blangonga was an ice monkey from the second generation that was sorta like a discount Rajang, and Copper Blangonga was its subspecies introduced in Freedom Unite. That was instead in the desert as opposed to the snowy mountains. Copper Blangonga was special because it was the first subspecies we got that actively changed the ecology, element, and location you can fight the monster in. Whereas all the previous ones would basically just be a color change, and they make the monster a bit more powerful, and that's it. Our old subspecies was sort of more like variants, I would say, that we see today. Yeah. Alright, tier 3, baby. We're starting to get into the weeds of it. Starting with the unknown black flying wyvern. This thing is an absolutely bonkers monster that was exclusive to Frontier. Visually, it was very similar to a Rathalos or a Rathian, but it was anything but those things as far as I can tell. This thing has 5 different rage states that gradually increase as you damage it, a near invulnerability to all status effects, and even 2 additional forms, known as Supremacy Unknown and Solstice War Unknown. Holy shit. This is certainly a flying wyvern well and truly on par with Elder Dragons, to the point that it can actually be repelled, much like Elder Dragons can be in the earlier games, so yeah, seems pretty gnarly. Wyvern Rex is taken from a few concept art pieces in one of the earlier art books, and is said to be the ancestral monster to all wyverns. Every wyvern that exists currently in the Monster Hunter world it comes from Wyvern Rex at some point in its evolutionary history. Visually, it's very reminiscent of Tigrex, which is intentional and shows that wyverns evolved from being 4-legged to 2-legged rather than the other way around. It has dark scales and also almost reminds you of a Fatalis, to be honest, when you look at it real close. The Feline Village games are the Dark Souls of Monster Hunter, and I mean that in the sense that they were made by From Software. They feature the titular feline running around and clobbering monsters in a cutesy style with rhythm game controls. They were PSP exclusives and also exclusive to Japan, like half of the games in this entire series. The theory here is that the white Kazoo that we see far more frequently are actually the subspecies of the monster, being white due to a common genetic defect, whilst the red Kazoo are actually normal Kazoo. That's what they actually look like. A neat little bit of ecology, I suppose. It's still considered a subspecies though, because they are much more reclusive and thus far less common. This one is a pretty basic fan theory, and it is that the Yangaruga is a crossbreed between a Kutku and a Rathian, and arises from the fact that it basically, mechanically, is a mix of those two monsters. It looks and behaves like a Kutku, but it attacks like a Rathian. Nothing more than fans having a bit of fun with some fan theories. Pretty harmless and pretty fun, I'd say. I would have thought that this one would be a little bit higher on the list because I thought this was pretty common knowledge, but yeah, the majority of the monsters that you find in Monster Hunter Rise, or at least in the base game, I'd say, are based on Japanese folklore, specifically yokai. I think this design motif lends the monsters a much more coherent feel across the entire game, and it makes them a bit more mysterious as well. As far as examples go, Azuchi is supposed to be the Kama Itachi, which is a weasel-like creature with blades for hands that lives in dust devils. Aknosom is based on the living umbrella yokai Kasabake, and my personal favorite, Gosarag, is based on the Namahage, with a bit of Oni influence going on in there as well. Oh boy, now we are getting into it. You want to talk about some war crimes and atrocities? Does that sound like fun? The Equal Dragon Weapon is an artificial dragon created by the ancient civilization that is stitched together corpses of elder dragons. They're bolted together by a metal shell that keeps them all as one, and it's intended to be a weapon, a super soldier to be used against the monsters themselves. Yeah, it's pretty gnarly and pretty dark for Monster Hunter. This is said to be the thing that began the Great Dragon War that ultimately resulted in the ancient civilization being just utterly annihilated and destroyed. All of this is pretty neat, but a little grim for our jovial little Monster Hunter series, and so it's worth noting that it's all just pulled from early concept work for the original Monster Hunter game, and it never made it past that phase. As such, this is not considered canon, something I am personally thankful for, but many are disappointed by. I don't know why. It doesn't fit the vibe, I feel. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we're on to tier 4, and now we're getting into the dark web of Monster Hunter just a little bit. The most I could find about the Hellfire Jagras was a mod for Monster Hunter World that took our pal, the Great Jagras, and turned him into a demon from the deepest pits of hell. Yeah, it's big, it's on fire, it's fast, and that's about it. It does have some pretty solid texture work, I'd say. Looks pretty cool, but that's all I got. That's all I've got on it. I don't know if there's a deeper meaning. I don't know. Now on to a legitimate monster variation, all the way from the previously mentioned Monster Hunter Explore. Destruction Wyvern Rathalos is a neon blue and black special species of Rathalos that looks almost nothing like a Rathalos, apart from the fact that it's a flying wyvern, I'd say. It shoots laser beams from the sky, but otherwise apparently behaves very much like a Rathalos, so, yeah. Oh, and for the weebs among us, this is a crossover monster with Fairy Tail. Never read Fairy Tail or watched it, but there you go. Another one that I thought was pretty common knowledge, Curse Fatalis armor. Read just about any Fatalis armor description, and you will immediately see that the Fatalis armor kind of fucks you up. Some examples are, the instant it is worn, the lust for darkness reigns. The longer you use it, the more you feel the armor's spirit take control of you. Those who wear it are said to have terrible nightmares. And leg armor that makes it feel as if both your legs are being constantly seized by Fatalis itself. Yeah. I think this one came about because in-game you can hunt things like Xeno'jiiva over and over again, despite it supposedly being this unique occurrence of a monster that comes once in a lifetime, and the same goes for like Sharish Valda, supposedly being the one and only Everworm, but you can farm it for its skin as much as you like. Ultimately, it's just an example of the necessity to be able to play the game and making concessions in the lore and the story of the game, I'd say. Nothing too crazy about reviving. Though I think the Dia Moralis can revive itself from its beating heart, which is crazy. Back to the ancient civilization, baby. The tower in question here is the main one we see as one of the maps that you constantly verse elder dragons at throughout the series and can be seen in the background of the Forlorn Arena. The people of the ancient civilization supposedly use monster materials to make all of their structures and all of their buildings, and it's said that the tower itself is made out of elder dragons such as Kushala Daora, because it's got steel scales, you see. This is obviously not a great thing, because think about how many monsters you need to slay to just make yourself a set of armor and a weapon. Now, multiply that number by like 1 billion, and you get a whole tower. Yeah, the Elder Dragons probably weren't very happy about that one. The Tale of the Five is an in-game book you can find in your room in Monster Hunter World, and it tells the story of a creation myth depicting a group of people and 5 dragons before the world existed. You can go and read the full thing for yourself if you like, but ultimately it tells us that these dragons created the sky and the sea with their breath, and each of them became an element of the world we live in. One became the land, one became the mountains, one became the lakes and the rain, and one became the forests, and the last ascended into the sky and became the Sapphire Star. We'll come back to the Sapphire Star in just a bit. Julius was first introduced as the Ace Commander in Monster Hunter 4, and he is the leader of the Ace Hunters. He was then given more lore and a name in that Monster Hunter movie that was on Netflix that came out and wasn't the awful live-action one. He is the teacher of Aiden, otherwise known as the Ace Cadet or the Excitable A-Lister, and is a cool and stoic badass and all that good stuff. He's cool. I mean, look at this man. He was clearly designed to mirror a Rajang. He even goes toe-to-toe with one with no weapon and just a rock. So, yeah, the dude is a Rajang. Yeah, moving on. This one refers to the fact that during the Safijiva fight, you can see multiple Xenojiva eggs and cocoons in the backgrounds of the secluded valley, implying that there could be more Xenojiva out there outside of the one that we slayed, and this one that became Safijiva. Pretty straightforward. This one is fun headcanon that I can get behind. In the opening cutscene of Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, we see a hunter getting prepared to hunt a Nagakuga. We get a little montage of his armor being made, and he puts it on, and would you look at that, it just so happens to be the old school Rathian armor. The same armor that the huntsman wears in Monster Hunter World. You could obviously point out that this hunter then proceeds to grab a greatsword and not a longsword, but I choose to believe this one, because it's just fun to do so. Alright, okay ladies and gentlemen, we are past the halfway point. First things first, obscure weapons, starting with the Axel Axe. This one's a pretty neat one that was only ever in Monster Hunter Explore and can only be described as a rocket-propelled great axe. It is very cool. It is as cool as it sounds, and awesome, and very cool and sick. But unfortunately, I don't like our chances of ever seeing this in a mainline game. Next up is, of course, the Tonfa. This one was exclusive to Monster Hunter Frontier, and it's a pretty iconic weapon in its own right. They are the closest thing the series has to a fist weapon, and they are fast, mobile impact weapons that allow the hunter to jump and do flips and shit, Attack on Titan style. As if that wasn't enough, it also has two different modes, long and short mode. Long mode has normal hit zone damage, and short mode has inverted hit zone damage, so what used to be a monster's toughest part is now its weakest part, and vice versa. I would personally love to see these in the mainline series, and I think out of the obscure weapons, it's probably the most likely to do so, but we'll have to wait and see. And our third and final obscure weapon is the Magnet Spike. One of the few examples of the melee weapons dealing both impact and slashing damage, the Magnet Spike is massive. It's a gigantic weapon, but it can move pretty quickly because it manipulates magnetic fields to allow the hunter to dash in and out of combat. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It lets you stick a magnet to a monster and switch between attraction and repulsion to dash forward and away from them. Probably the most out there weapon, and since we have yet to see any magnetism in the mainline series, I think it's unlikely that we see this weapon again, particularly anytime soon, but it would still be cool to do so. I don't know what this one means. I guess it's just as it sounds. White Fatales kills the player, but I could not find anything on the topic. So, yeah, I guess a headcanon for the fact that if you're facing a White Fatalis, you're already dead. Yeah, sounds about right. This one refers to the idea that in Monster Hunter World, there was more dev time spent on the Ancient Forest and the Wildspire Waste compared to the other maps like the Coral Highlands, the Rotten Vale, and the Eldest Recess. Whilst I couldn't find anything solid that backs up the claim, there's a few things that come to mind that could back it up, I think. The first two maps feel more complex. First of all, they have more camps, they flow better, and they loop in on themselves much more consistently, and they lead to a smoother gameplay feel, I think. Maybe I'm crazy. They also feature more in-depth terrain hazards, with the Ancient Forest having the falling rocks that are in the vines, the waterfall at the top of the Wyvern Nest, and the vines that the monsters can fall through, and the Wildspire has the pretty famous sinkhole that the Diablost likes to explode through. So, yeah, I can see where this one comes from. I don't know if it's necessarily the case, but I wouldn't be surprised. Let's just say that. I was either not aware of this or had completely forgotten about it, and no, it's not just talking about a bulldrome. In Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, there's a rare chance that a bullfanger will spawn, and it's just really, really big. Almost bulldrome sized, as if it's a bulldrome in the making. That's cool. That's nice. It's a neat little touch that I appreciate. The Lava Canyon was an arena map that only showed up in Monster Hunter Portable 3rd for the express purpose to fight a Cantor. It's sort of this island inside this gigantic magma cavern with abandoned ruins in the background, and it has not been seen since, like a lot of arena maps, unfortunately. Ghost Caesar is, I suppose, a variant for the online exclusive monster Caesar, which is just a giant beaver-looking guy. It differs in that it has blood-soaked hands and a tail and is missing an eye, making for a pretty metal rendition of a monster that is not particularly scary, I don't think, and if the ghost part of the name is to be taken literally, the implications for the series are pretty wild. This one refers to the fact that in Monster Hunter Frontier, years before Monster Hunter World released Safi'jiiva and its weapon mechanics, there was a very similar set of mechanics that already existed. Sky Corridor was a particular map in Monster Hunter Frontier that housed specific materials that could be crafted into a variety of weapons unique to that map. From there, you could give these weapons statuses, elements, affinity boosts, gunner skills, and more. Sound familiar? Because it should. I don't know exactly why this has made it this far down the list, because my assumption is that it's just referring to the Holiday Joy Fest from Monster Hunter World, which I could not find a single bit of controversy surrounding it, so I don't know. I don't know why it's here. It was an event where they decked the Gathering Hall out with cool Chinese New Year themed designs and gave us some neat event armors. Yeah, I don't know why it's at the bottom of tier 5. Alright, editing Ginge here, I found something about a quest that I never actually did, which was a limited event quest that had a hunt for 5 oversized moss swines, 4 big ones, and 1 really, really big one. The moss swine were aggressive, and they one-shot you. I think it was a celebration for Year of the Pig, and that's what this point is referring to. Alright, moving on. This is exactly as it sounds, a list of monsters that leaked prior to Monster Hunter World, that were going to be in the base game. To be fair, the list remained pretty accurate to what actually came out in base world, with a few exceptions here and there. Lunastra and Devil Joe were on the list, but weren't actually in the base game. They were added in patches later in World's life cycle. Alatreon was also there, but we wouldn't see Alatreon until a later patch of Iceborne, and the Orochi Kira never made it, which makes it the only monster on the list that never got in at all. Poor Orochi Kirin. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we are almost there. We are getting there. We are up to tier 6, and we're kicking it off with Monster Hunter Orage. Orage is a lesser-known manga about Monster Hunter that ran from 2008 and only had 4 volumes, I'm afraid. Again, for the weebs in here,
Looks good.
it is by the guy who made Fairy Tail, and it's an alright read, I think. It's a bit gritty from the Monster Hunter aesthetic, in my opinion, but it does feature some unique monsters that have never turned up anywhere outside the manga at all, so it's worth checking out just for that, I think. All of that said, if you want to read a Monster Hunter manga, just go and read Flash Hunter. It's way better and good and fun and cool. This was a little all over the place in terms of theories I could find, because there's multiple threads that I found that come up with different ideas about this exact thing. Long story short, the idea is that Safi'jiiva lured Alatreon to the New World, specifically the Secluded Valley, to absorb its bioenergy and get big and strong. I don't think Safi'jiiva wins that fight, so I don't know why. Anyway, yeah. This point will be better served by throwing up some pictures on screen, so have a look at some of these gnarly-ass early concepts for Nergigante. I do prefer the final version we got over these, but you got to admit, these are pretty wild and out there, particularly the uncolored one in the bottom right. Yeah, I hope they reuse some of these designs for something at some point. Swapping back to Frontier for a second, Midogaron is a giant wolf monster that is the lone version of a different version of a monster called Kamu Arugaron. Midogaron is unique for several different reasons, but my favorite one is that it will target and single out a hunter that posted the quest in the first place, relentlessly pursuing them until they are dead. I can imagine this caused many an argument on who exactly was going to take the ring to Mordor, so to speak, in those Frontier lobbies, and that sounds like a lot of fun. Another mod monster, Crimson Pale Nergigante, was a custom subspecies for the big guy and is best described by the mod creator as follows. Crimson Pale Nergigante is a subspecies that excels at lightning element and fire element. Its speed surpass far beyond normal Nergigante and is able to manipulate fire and lightning. The roar is so strong and also very hot that causes you to take damage and knock you while your body catch on fire. Cool. This one sort of continues on the ancient civilization stuff that we were talking about earlier. Long story short, the dragons got the shits that the ancient civilization people were butchering their kind, which is fair enough, and using their skin to make stuff, and so they started a war about it. This war was long and super violent, but ended up with many dragons becoming extinct, and the people being entirely wiped out. So, not a great outcome, but we've moved past it now. The best I've got for this one is a quest description from the Monster Hunter World quest, Master of the Gale, that reads as follows. Did you know that some cultures worship Kushala Daora as a god of the wind? Luckily, we're not one of them. I'm determined to study its mastery of flight. Just think of the benefits. And yeah,
I think that makes sense. Elder dragons in general tend to have a bit of a higher being aura to them that makes sense that people would worship them, like mythological creatures that exists in mythos today in the real world. I think that makes sense. A classic one, this one is, truly takes us back to the very beginning. I'm not sure if it's canon, I always thought it was, and I will continue to do so. Lao Shenlong is a big guy, one of the largest monsters we've ever seen, but it is said that its sudden appearance and assault on the fortress back in the early Monster Hunter days was caused by it being so scared of Fatalis that it just tried to run away and it ran into the town and the fortress, and that's what happened. Woo! Right at the end of tier 6, this one is a deep fucking cut for sure. Basically, if you listen to the battle music for one of the earlier jungles in Monster Hunter, I'm pretty sure it's the second jungle, but I could be wrong, there's a part where the vocals are chanting something or other. This sound was also originally used in the Ocarina of Time Fire Temple soundtrack, and it had its own controversy associated with it because it apparently translates into Muslim prayer in Arabic, which offended some folks. The more you know, huh? Whew, second to last tier, tier 7, and we're kicking it off with some super sweet concept stuff. I'll just do the ancient serpent and the extinct species points together because I think that makes sense. Extinct species are pretty self-explanatory, monsters that are known to have existed in the Monster Hunter universe at some point, generally via lore or concept art, are confirmed to no longer exist. That's how extinction works. There's several of these that stem mainly from the first and second generation concept art books, one of which is the Ancient Serpent. Whilst considered an extinct species, yes, it is possible that this thing still exists within universe. It's a gigantic Piscine wyvern that has fully lost its wings and legs and wields power comparable to an elder dragon. Just a big fish. Another famous extinct species is the Wyvern Rex that we spoke about just a little bit ago. So yeah, there's quite a few of them. It's pretty cool. Go and look them up if you want to see and learn about that kind of stuff. Whilst not on the extinct species list, the Gaia Dragon is another concept art monster that is pretty well known in the community because it would just be super cool to see it fully realized in game. The idea is that it's a huge elder dragon whose appearance and abilities vary depending on which map you fight it in. It would be an obsidian dragon in the desert, a marsh dragon in the swamps and jungles, or a lava dragon in volcanic maps. The actual design is a little weak by today's standards, but the concept remains strong, I think. This is another one that I was blissfully unaware of before making this video. Zora Magdaros, canonically, has a second pair of arms on its back where its wings should be, that it uses to help hold up its gigantic shell. This feature of it is not nightmare fuel at all. No sir, not at all. Moving on, now, please. Thank you. After I googled this prompt, I just ended up watching Max Saw's Monster Hunter World review again, because once you start that video and your senses are just assaulted, you can't turn back. What were we talking about? Oh, right. This one's a bit of a doozy and gets into some rough territory that's just a touch more than I'm comfortable with going into here. But I think the basic idea is that the through line of Monster Hunter World, and in particular Iceborne, is that it's about colonialism and how awesome and good and cool colonialism is. Because we move to the Hoarfrost Reach and we make Celiana there. I get where they're coming from, and colonialism sucks, but like, I don't know, man. I choose to think it's not that deep. But who am I to say the devs' intentions? I don't know them. It'd be cool to know them. Capcom, let me meet your devs. That would be sick. This one sort of piggybacks off the Kushala Daora worship one, but focuses on the black dragons like Fatalis and Alatreon. Apparently, there are cults in the world of Monster Hunter that worship these monsters out of fear of what they may do to the world. Sort of like how real people worship gods out of fear. Yeah, it makes sense. I get it. Whilst Fatalis has been in the series since the very first entry, it was never canonically fought or slain prior to Iceborne. Every single other Fatalis hunt is supposed to be a myth, a legend, or something along those lines. That was until it was woven into the story of Iceborne, and now there has been at least one canon occurrence of a Fatalis being slain. Fuck. And now there is one in-universe canon event of Fatalis being slain at Castle Shrade by the player in Monster Hunter World. And that's it. That's the only time that's happened. Best I can tell, this one refers to the alternate translation for the Bloodbath Diablos from Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate. This guy is the secondary flagship for that game and makes up the other half of the Unrivaled 2 alongside Valstrux. It's a G-rank exclusive deviant that can only be fought after defeating every other deviant first, and he kicks ass. Yeah, pretty cool. This one's pretty self-explanatory. Xeno'jiiva looks a lot like an alien, I'd say, and well, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. That's the idea anyway. I'm not saying I agree. I don't really. I think he's just a weird bioenergy dragon, and he looks weird because he's underdeveloped because we interrupted and made him be born early. Yeah, that's my take. This is a cool concept that unfortunately never made it into the final version of World, but apparently there was set to be colossal monsters that would fight each other in the distance of the Elder's Recess and would occasionally pose environmental hazards on the map itself. You can see a few ideas in the concept art for World that shows Lao Shanlung, the Lamadur, and Yamatsukami all chilling in the background of the Elder's Recess. Yeah, I would like to see this explored at some point. This sounds freaking awesome. Alrighty, we're almost there, ladies and gentlemen. We're up to the final tier, tier 8, which is it. We're just going to go through this and we're done with the iceberg. It's been a long one, but we're almost through it. The Sapphire Star is part of the tale of the 5 and serves as the idea for guidance and hope throughout the entire story of World. This theory doesn't make much sense to me because the Sapphire Star is pretty explicitly a metaphorical thing, I think, and is a title bestowed upon the player, but I think the idea is that Xeno'jiiva, and by extension Safi'jiiva, are the Sapphire Star from the story. Safi'jiiva's ultimate move being called Sapphire of the Emperor is a particular case for this theory, and we fucking wrecked both of those guys. I don't really buy into this one, but it exists nonetheless, and let people have fun with theories, I think is a good way to go. I couldn't even find the concept art for this one, even though I swear I've seen it before. So it's either super duper rare or I completely made up the image in my head. But long story short, it's like a single piece of early concept that depicted the original area where the feline was supposed to come from. It's essentially a super pure white forest with white trees and all that sort of thing. It's all magical and all that. And yeah, that's the Power Tree Forest. The Crypt Hydra, one of the most infamous pieces of early-ass concept art the series has, I think. The image shows a giant two-headed snake monster covered in bandages emerging from some form of ancient ruin. Gives off very big Gods of Egypt vibes. Whilst this guy never got past the concept phase in this state, it is believed that the idea eventually became Nikakos, which frankly fits much better with the Mon Hun aesthetic, I would say, and works pretty well. An interesting one for sure, and is exactly as it sounds. I haven't played Frontier, unfortunately, but it seems like a pretty out there theory because all of the maps in Frontier that show evidence of the ancient civilization, such as the towers, are all run down and destroyed just like they are in the main series. Still a fun way to think about the divide between this and the mainline games though. A classic glitch in Monster Hunter Tri, and one of the two out-of-bounds glitches I can think of in Monster Hunter history, the other one being in Freedom Unite's Forest and Hills map. Simply put, if you climb up to the Wyvern Nest area in the deserted island, and then jump off the cliff and fall down into Area 5, another hunter can shoot you just as you enter the area, and you will be thrown out of bounds. This allows you to run around outside the map and run into invisible walls and whatnot, and it's fun to do once or twice to just break the game, you know? For those wondering, and if I recall correctly, the Freedom Unite glitch was very similar. You could go to the Area 5 of Forest and Hills and begin to climb the cliff. About 2 or 3 ledges up, if you small barrel bombed yourself towards the wall, it would throw you out of bounds and allow you to run around and see the map from weird vantage points. Fun times. The only thing I could find on this one was a single comment in the original Reddit post that this iceberg comes from that reads, "What is the upright tree dragon?" with no replies. I would also like to know, Zed Crash, because I have no idea. Someone please enlighten me in the comments down below. Thank you. Well, we started this iceberg with Sharish Valda, so let's finish it with him. I hadn't heard of the term Origin Dragon before this, but apparently it's the suborder that all the Fatalis fall into, according to this post by Monster Hunter lore master Bandino anyway. This entry is basically stating that Sharish Valda is a close relative of Fatalis, I suppose, which doesn't really mesh in my mind. I don't get that. All right, folks, you asked for it. I made an iceberg video a little while back now that came in a little under 40 minutes for the whole thing. Trash. Throw it out. Garbage, garbanzo beans, we don't need it. We need something with a bit more meat on its bones, a bit more substance. So let's kick it up a notch. Bam! I mentioned at the start of that video a much longer, much more involved Monster Hunter iceberg. And in case it wasn't clear, here we are. This video is the first of 8 tiers, and granted the first tier is about twice the size of the rest of them, it covers a lot of ground. It's also a few years old at this stage, so some newer stuff like Sunbreak and Wilds don't feature a whole lot, but I'll bring them up if they're relevant. So with 60 odd entries to get through, we best get started. Strap in, folks, as we dive into tier 1 of the ultimate Monster Hunter iceberg. Starting with our first entry, The Tale of the Five. Kicking things off with a pretty straightforward one, The Tale of the Five is a creation myth story in the world of Monster Hunter, which is also a running through line of the story of Monster Hunter World, and can be read in a book that sits next to the bed in the player's room. The story opens by talking about a timeless world of nothingness, inhabited by several groups of people and 5 dragons. When the people questioned why there was a whole lot of nothing around, the dragons created the sky and the oceans. From the center of the ocean they made an island, and the 5 dragons then disappeared, each transforming into a different aspect of the world. One dragon became the land, one became the mountains, one became the lakes and the rain, one became the forests, and the final one ascended high into the sky and became a brilliant blue star. A sapphire star, if you will. The humans then wondered why the dragons had left them, and a single youth set out to find them, eventually returning with scales from each of the dragon. With these scales, the humans then created and molded their own land. They made the moon, they made the day and night cycle, they made seasons, and ultimately they created time. As time moved forward, many forgot about the 5 dragons, though deep within every person exists the call and the knowledge of that island of the 5, the first island ever created. And I think you'll find that the implication is that this island is in fact the New World. The Tower. The Tower is a huge megastructure that was created by the ancient civilization and functions as a playable map that can be found in many Monster Hunter games. It is incredibly tall, reaching up past the clouds, and is in a state of disrepair due to the ancient civilization being utterly annihilated in the Great Dragon War. More on that shortly. The tower has several different iterations depending on what game you are playing and what monster you are hunting. But in its most normal state, it features 10 areas total, which consist of 2 at the base of the tower, several internal areas, several open air areas, and the top of the tower where you will most often fight your target monster. This map is usually used to fight Elder Dragons, however several other powerful monsters can be found here too. It should be noted that the other maps like Tower 2, Nest Hole, Tower Summit, and Tower 3/Forlorn Arena are all slight variations or condensed versions of the same locale, showing you different subsections, rooms, and areas found throughout the structure, building on its strange design whilst also making custom maps to fight certain rare monsters like Yamatsukami, Lucent Nagakuga, and Molten Tigrex. Dead Gypserus in the Hollow. This one is a neat little bit of environmental design coupled with some in-game lore that can be easily missed. In Monster Hunter 4, a map called the Sunken Hollow was added to the ever-expanding roster of locales. It was a series of subterranean tunnels and caverns full of gigantic spiderwebs and water flowing through it. It was a very moist environment. There was also an alternate version of the map known as the Volcanic Hollow, which was the same map just filled with lava following a volcanic eruption. Regardless of which version you're in, Area 5 of this map features a series of giant cocoons that hang from the ceiling and can be seen in the distance, and closer inspection would reveal that these are in fact dead Gypserus wrapped in spiderweb. This implied that this area was the nest of a Nursilla, a gigantic spider-like monster akin to Rachnakodaki. For those that don't know, Nursilla are known to hunt and kill Gypserus, take them back to their nests, feed on them slowly, and then skin them, and apply that skin to their own body.
Fuck.
That is what the purple covering on a Nursilla is in-game. It's Gypserus skin. Yeah. Moving on. The New World. The New World is the location where the entirety of Monster Hunter World and Iceborne take place, except for the Fatalis Hunt. And I guess the Hoarfrost Reach and Origin Isle are off the coast of the main continent, but I'd say they still count. It's not fully explored or described, having only been occupied by people for about 40 years at the point of World's story, and so far only features the locales you visit in that game. By comparison, the Old World is where the rest of the Monster Hunter series takes place, and as such has many more in-game locales representing it. The New World seems to have a wider variety and denser concentration of monsters such as fanged wyverns, and wingdrakes, as well as elder dragons due to the Elder Crossing event, with less leviathans, bird wyverns, and neopterans than the old world. As I mentioned before, it's also said to be the point of origin for the Tale of the Five story, and it has many analogues of species usually found in the old world, like felines to grimalkins and shakaluckas to garjaluckas and boas. Rajang preys on Kirin. Whilst I'm not certain when this originated, Rajang preying on Kirin is indeed canon. In fact, it is one of, if not the only monster that is not an Elder Dragon that actively seeks out and preys on a specific Elder Dragon. Devil Joes will also take on Elder Dragons and can come out on top, but they don't seek a specific one out for a specific reason. Rajang, on the other hand, do, and they do this to try and break off the Kirin's horn and eat it to trigger its change into its golden enraged state and charge the organ in its body that gives it the ability to create lightning. This is of course on full display in Iceborne when we get to witness a Rajang attacking and breaking a Kirin's horn off in its intro cutscene. It also does this if it engages in a turf war with a Kirin. Hey, editing Ginge here. This apparently comes from Monster Hunter Dose, where you could feed a Rajang a Kirin horn to make it stronger in the little arena monster battle mode thing that Dose had, which we will cover later in the video. Alright, back to it. Hollow Shen-Garen in the Jurassic Frontier. This is a cool one, and along a similar vein to the Dead Gypsaros entry we just went over, and it shows that there is a lot more to the maps in Monster Hunter than you may recognise. The Jurassic Frontier was introduced in Monster Hunter Generations and was the intro map for that game. It was quite similar to the Ancient Forest with regards to its theming being very prehistoric in design and vibe. As you descend through this map, you end up at the bottom of a series of cliffs, dense in plant life and fungus, and there's even this big cool gigantic T-Rex looking skull. Area 10 of the Jurassic Frontier has a section that you can climb up as a one-way ticket back to the top of the map, but what you may not notice is that this wall of vines is actually hanging from the corpse or perhaps shed exoskeleton of a Shen-Garen. Shen-Garen is a monster that was first seen in Monster Hunter Dose and has since only appeared in a couple of the handheld Gen 2 games as well as the MMOs. It was a colossal crab with incredibly long legs, and it was a siege fight much like the other huge monsters, and like Daimyo and Shogun, it uses a monster's skull for its shell, opting for a Laoshan lung skull because it's just so big. Its presence in Generations may only be limited to this, but it was a nice detail hiding in plain sight nonetheless. Dead Zora Magdaros. This entry could be referring to one of two things, so I'll cover them both. The first is that the Guiding Lands map found at the end of Iceborne is said to have been formed as a result of a Zora Magdaros dying and releasing all of its bioenergy. This is supported by several factors. Whilst it's not present in Master Rank at all, players can craft Master Rank Zora Magdaros equipment using materials gathered throughout the Guiding Lands. The skull of a Zora Magdaros is present in the Rotten Vale section of the map, and a large rocky structure that looks like Zora's shell can be seen in the volcanic region. The second thing that this could be referring to is the Frost Islands found in Monster Hunter Rise. Lying through the center of that map is a set of gigantic bones, the skull of which appears to be very similar to a Zora Magdaros with a Dragonator stuck in its head. The map itself is said to have been made a barren place of desolation and death following the battle that brought the creature down. Whether this is confirmed to be a Zora Magdaros or just a closely related monster, I'm not sure, but we know that they explode when they die, so I'd say it's completely feasible that that's what caused the aforementioned desolation and death. Ancient Civilization. Now, I'm still unsure if the Ancient Civilization page on the wiki is all confirmed canon. In fact, I'm pretty sure that at least parts of it are confirmed to not be canon, but nevertheless, let's get into it because sometimes it's fun to discuss non-canon stuff anyway. Throughout the world of Monster Hunter, there is a lot of evidence that some sort of advanced civilization occupied this place a very long time ago, far more advanced than the current civilization we see when we play the games. The most obvious evidence we come across is the collection of ruins that can be found throughout various maps, in particular the Tower, Sky Corridor, and Cloud Viewing Fortress maps. The people of this culture had found different ways to harness the power of monsters, using them for their own means, be those justified or nefarious. Ultimately, this misuse of monsters resulted in their downfall, and we'll go over several different aspects of the ancient civilization over the next few points to flesh out the lore behind it, a lot of which is also non-canon. The perfect enemy for humanity. This is an entity that arose during the Great Dragon War and refers to a monster that despised humanity to such a degree that it would lay waste to entire kingdoms as it pleased. This is the dragon that destroyed Castle Shrade and is said to live there to this day. It holds on to the memories of its fellow monsters being slain in droves by the ancient civilization, and it uses that resentment to fuel its destruction, to the point that it will take fallen humans and melt them onto its own body to create armor for itself in the same way the humans did to its brethren. You've probably figured it out by now, the perfect enemy of humanity is implied to be the Fatalis. The EDW and the Great Dragon War. When the ancient civilization was at the height of their power, their way of life and advancement in technology required the death of immeasurable dragons to be able to get the materials they needed to use to build their weapons and structures. This resulted in the beginning of the Great Dragon War, as the monsters rose up against them and their hubris to defy nature in such a drastic way. These dragons fought to annihilate humanity itself, and this war was a worldwide event which in the end resulted in the extinction of a whole bunch of monsters and the ancient civilization being scrubbed from the world almost entirely, with none being left alive and only ruins remaining. The inciting incident that was said to be the catalyst to kick off the Great Dragon War is known as the Forbidden Act. This act was considered to be a crime against nature, as the ancient civilization worked to create their own life forms, doing so by taking the lives of natural creatures. The only known example of this creation was the Equal Dragon Weapon, or EDW for short. This abomination was effectively a walking corpse made of the bodies of many elder dragons, pieced together and held in one piece by a metal frame. It's pretty dark by Monster Hunter standards, I must say. I'm glad it's pretty much not canon. Pause. This video is brought to you in partnership with Fanatical. Fanatical is a leading PC gaming and entertainment digital retailer with some of the best prices on the biggest games. Monster Hunter Wilds is just around the corner, and you can pre-order your Steam key with Fanatical for 18% off right now up until its release. Or you could grab yourself a copy of Monster Hunter World or Rise if you're just getting into the series. Whichever game you're looking for, by using my affiliate link in the description and pinned comment down below, you will be directly supporting this channel and scoring yourself some great games in the process. Thanks to Fanatical for partnering with me for this video, and let's get back to it. Lao Shan Lung is running from Fatalis. For those not acquainted with the Lao Shan Lung, this guy was a giant elder dragon that was introduced way back in the first Monster Hunter game. It could be fought in the fortress as it slowly advanced with little regard for the player character, hitting you simply by moving its body. The explanation given for its sudden appearance and its behavior of persisting with its advance despite being attacked is that it is in fact fleeing from the Fatalis. Whether Fatalis is actively trying to kill it or not is unclear, but given the Fatalis lore we just went over, I'd be surprised if that was the case. It likes monsters and doesn't like humans. So rather, it seems that Lao Shan Lung would just like to not be where Fatalis is, because of all the destruction that it causes. And the fortress stands in Lao's way, I'm afraid. Whilst it's common knowledge these days, I tried to find the original source of this detail, and the best I got was an NPC in Monster Hunter DOS that theorizes that this may be the case, so I guess that's where it comes from. Joke weapons. This point is referring to the longsword, one of the 14 weapons in the game. Why does one weapon need so many counters? It's a joke in and of itself. I'm kidding, of course, don't come for me longsword mains, please. Throughout the series, there has been a running trend of making weapons, usually event ones, that are just a little bit silly. From a hammer that is just a teddy bear, to a corncob gun lance, to a great sword that is just a giant frozen fish. These are fun, light-hearted additions that help the series feel less serious. They're usually not that powerful, but not everything has to be the best of the best when you're just trying to have a bit of fun with it. Size charts. As the generations go on and more monsters are added to the roster, it's fun seeing them compared side by side to see which are truly the biggest and the baddest. This is where the size charts come in. Officially released by Capcom, these are images that scale the monster models of a given generation next to each other to show them all in one big lineup. They're fun to have a look at every now and then, especially for some of the larger monsters, which we often don't get much in the way of comparisons to other monsters, or we don't get to see their entire body during the hunt very well. More recently, these have transitioned to a video format, showing the sizes of monsters compared to hunters and felines, and sometimes even interacting with one another. Handheld Purgatory. Monster Hunter has a long and storied history that dates back over 20 years by the time this video comes out. The series has appeared on many different consoles over that time, beginning on the PS2 and then splitting between the PS2 and the PSP. The third generation moved it to be almost a Nintendo property as Capcom collaborated closely with them, featuring games on the Wii and the Wii U, ultimately moving to the 3DS, with the fourth generation being entirely contained within Nintendo's portable consoles. So prior to World, several of the Monster Hunter games out there were confined to either the PSP or the 3DS, and due to that fact, some fans at the time referred to this phenomena as handheld purgatory. All of that said, when accounting for ports, there are only 5 Monster Hunter titles that are truly portable exclusive games, and those are Freedom 2, Freedom Unite, Monster Hunter 4 and 4 Ultimate, and Generations. Monster Hunter Freedom is available as Monster Hunter G in Japan on the PS2 and Wii, though the content differs slightly. Monster Hunter Portable 3rd has a PS4 port in Japan, and Generations Ultimate is available on the Switch, which makes it both a handheld and a home console game at the same time. Now obviously these days this is not the case, with the widespread launch of both World and Rise and their expansions, and the totally legitimate ways of playing all of those games on the PC, but at the time some of the best Monster Hunter games could not be properly experienced on a home console, and for many this remains the case. Moga Woods. The Moga Woods was a feature present in Monster Hunter 3 and 3 Ultimate that was essentially a precursor to modern expeditions. Back in those games, players could go out into the deserted island map without any specific objective or target, engage in a free hunt, and the map was renamed to the Moga Woods. The monsters that would appear and the conditions and abundance of resources could be checked by viewing the Moga forecast, and you could even select if you wanted to go out in the day or the night. During the day you would find standard monsters and low rank materials, whereas during the night you would find high rank materials and monsters not usually found in the deserted island could appear. Things like Baroth and Uragan and Diablos. It was a fun little feature that has since been greatly expanded on, but modern expeditions don't quite have the same vibe as Moga Woods did. It's not quite as novel an idea anymore, I'd say. The Huntsman. The Huntsman is a member of the First Fleet, and one of the NPCs you encounter throughout the story of Monster Hunter World. He's been a hunter for a very long time and is very set in his ways, wearing a set of old Rathian armor that bears the design from earlier Monster Hunter games. Though he's probably up for interpretation, I believe the Huntsman is sort of this expression or representation of the older Monster Hunter players that have been enjoying the series for years before World came out, and an acknowledgement by the developers that they were absolutely trying something new here. His inclusion in this iceberg is likely due to the running fan theory that he is the hunter that you see in the intro cutscene for Monster Hunter Freedom Unite. That cutscene features a hunter forging and wearing a set of old school Rathian armor and wielding a greatsword, which is the weapon that the Huntsman used to use before he changed to the longsword for something lighter to wield in his older age. Though not at all canon, and whether it's coincidence or a direct reference that this is the armor he uses, I find it yields even further credence to the idea that the Huntsman is an allegory for old school players of the series. Generations. Now, there's a chance that this is referring to the game called Monster Hunter Generations, but I don't believe that's the case because otherwise it would have the full title of the game. Rather, what I think it's referring to is the concept of generations in the mainline series that separate the Monster Hunter titles and group them together based on their inherent mechanics, visuals, and design philosophies, as well as the time frame they were made within. Each new generation begins when the next numbered Monster Hunter is released, which means that currently we have 5 generations with the 6th about to begin. As for which games fall within which generations, the first consists of Monster Hunter, Monster Hunter G, and Monster Hunter Freedom. The second consists of Monster Hunter DOS, Monster Hunter Portable 2nd or Freedom 2, and Monster Hunter Portable 2G or Freedom Unite. The third consists of Monster Hunter Tri, Portable 3rd, and 3 Ultimate. The fourth consists of Monster Hunter 4, 4 Ultimate, Generations, and Generations Ultimate. The fifth consists of Monster Hunter World, Rise, and their expansions Iceborne and Sunbreak, and the sixth will begin as we head into Monster Hunter Wilds. Think of these generations as different eras of Monster Hunter design and direction, with each having its own characteristics that work to innovate and drive the series forward. Dalamadeur in the Rotten Vale. This is another one of those not so hidden map details that if you don't have much context for, you may miss it altogether. Monster Hunter World's Rotten Vale is a fascinating map for many reasons, but for fans of Monster Hunter 4, you may notice some gigantic, familiar skeletons making up a good portion of the map. These skeletons, though much larger than anything we see in-game, appear to belong to a Dalamadeur, an absolutely colossal elder dragon, or at least a close relative of one. It seems there are multiple throughout the map as well. One of the skulls makes up the Radabar nest, the other can be seen down near Valhazak's lair, and part of their spine makes up some of the pathway in the upper region of the Vale. It's a very cool callback that really helps to make the in-game universe feel very connected. Variance versus Deviance. The divide between variance and deviance is ever shrinking, and the line certainly is blurred these days. Variants have been around for far longer, technically dating back to the first generation if you count the scarred yarn Garuga being labelled as a standard Garuga back in Freedom, though they have become far more relevant and official in the 5th generation. Currently they are defined as an individual or group anomaly of a certain monster. They are pretty much always more powerful than their standard counterpart and are more in tune with their inherent abilities, having one or more traits that set them apart. The variants we have gotten over the years include things like Scarred Yarn Garuga, Rusted Kushala Deora, Furious Rajang, Savage Devil Joe, Chaotic Gormagala, Raging Brachydios, Shrieking Legiana, Seething Basilgeuse, Black Veil Valhazak, Ruin Energigante, Frostfang Barioth, Crimson Glow Valstrux, Nawa the Allmother, Scorn Magnamalo, Primordial Malzeno, and several others that appear in Frontier and online. The Deviants, by comparison, debuted in Generations and were expanded upon in Generations Ultimate, though they remain confined to those games as of right now. They are defined as being special individuals who have survived harsh conditions or encounters and have changed or adapted to overcome them. They were said by the developers to be specifically designed to be the strongest monsters that change the way the hunter fights in a major way due to them being a true threat. There is also a misconception that Deviants are monsters that survived an intense encounter with a hunter in the past, though this is only confirmed to be the case for 2 of them. In total, there are 18 across both games, including Redhelm Azeros, Stonefist Hermitor, Hellblade Glavenus, Snow Baron Lagombi, Silverwind Nagakuga, Dread King Rathalos, Dread Queen Rathian, Drilltusk Tetsukabra, Grimclaw Tigrex, Crystalbeard Uragan, Dead-Eye Yarn Garuga, Thunderlord Zenoga, Bolt Reaver Astalos, Bloodbath Diablos, Elderfrost Gammoth, Nightcloak Malfestio, Soulseer Mizitsne, and Rustraiser Senator. Both of these groups offer a roster of monster variations that take a standard monster and increase their power by giving them some form of physical trait that makes them more powerful and dangerous. The only definitive thing that separates them is that the Deviants are deemed so dangerous that you need a special permit from the guild to hunt them, and I really like both of these groups. Bug monsters were missing in World. Monster Hunter World was many things to many people, but what it wasn't was kind to the arthropod-like monster classes. Whilst there were a diverse array of monsters present, the invertebrate monster classes were severely underrepresented. None of the existing large Carapacians, Temnocerans, or Neopteron monsters showed up at all, and there certainly weren't any new ones either. And of the small ones, there was only Hornitors and Vespoids, so the classes were effectively absent completely. And personally, I think there's plenty of monsters that could have fit the bill and suited World's aesthetic. Nursilla would have fit right into the Ancient Forest alongside maybe the Celtus Queen, the crabs could have been scuttling around the Wildspire Waste and the Elder's Recess, and hell, they could have even come up with a way to make the Vespoid Queen fun. As impossible as that seems. I suppose the thought process behind this was that the giant bugs aren't terribly appealing and detract from the widespread appeal they were aiming for in World. But given that we got some of the best additions to these monster classes in the previous generation, including the Nursilla and Celtus Queen like I said, and of course the amazing Atalkar, it's a little bizarre and a bit of a bummer that we didn't get such monsters in Monster Hunter World, or even anything new for that matter. Mysterious Fish. The Mysterious Fish seems to refer to an achievement in Iceborne called Submerged Mystery. The objective of this one is to find and capture a strange fish in the Hoarfrost Reach. The fish in question is called the Sea Lord's Crestfish, and looks like this. This fish can only be found in the Hoarfrost Reach at night in a particular pool in Area 8. And also sometimes, it just won't spawn. It's all up to chance. Landing this impressive catch will get you the achievement, along with some interesting flavor text that reads, "These beauties lurk at the bottom, save when surfacing to feed at night. They are so rare that they're said to be familiars of the sea god." Don't forget your bait bugs, folks. Black Diablos in Heat. This one is very well known at this stage and is one example of the term subspecies being a bit of a misnomer in Monster Hunter in general. The Black Diablos, though different in appearance to a standard Diablos, is actually just a female during the mating season. During this time, their shell turns a dark black to signal that they are fertile, along with being increasingly aggressive, and will just attack with little to no reason at all. There's a few examples of subspecies not actually being genetically different from the common species throughout the history of Monster Hunter, but this one is probably the best known example. Sharej Valda looks at the player. I caught some flack for this one in my first Iceberg video. Look, it is confirmed that purely from a model mechanics point of view, no, Sharej Valda's eyes do not track and follow the camera. That said, it still looks like it does, as was pointed out in the comments of that last video, and yeah, I suppose you're right, it does. So it doesn't really matter whether it is technically looking at us or not, it gives the illusion that it does, which is pretty cool regardless. Yeah. Plesioth Hitbox. The older Monster Hunter games are notorious for their absolutely shocking hitboxes, but there's one monster in particular that takes the cake. A hitbox, for those that don't know, is an invisible mechanic in video games that dictate whether one object has collision with another, specifically detecting when it collides with a hurtbox, and as such, helps detect whether attacks connect in a video game. In an ideal world, the hitbox occupies the model perfectly, or otherwise has some form of particle effect that indicates the attack's range and impact. Not in the Plesioth's case though. Plesioth's hitbox was so wild on its tailspin and hip check attacks that it would hit you from halfway across the arena. without coming anywhere near you. This was so infamous, in fact, that the developers in Monster Hunter Stories leaned into it and gave the Plesioth in that game an attack called the Hyperspace Tackle, where it would hip check in place and hit every enemy at the same time. Good meme. Nergigante is nature's balancing mechanism. This is a pretty consistent through line of base world story, and even into Iceborne as Nergigante ultimately chows down on Shara's Valder as well. Nerg's purpose in the story, and by extension in the new world as a whole, is to act as a balancing mechanism to keep Elder Dragons under control during the Elder Crossing and limit their impact on the ecosystem. Nerg will hunt and eat them and thus keeps them from laying waste to entire locales. That said, Nergigante itself seems very destructive and requires a massive amount of energy to stay alive, and so that's when we step in to become the real balancing mechanism, I suppose. Or that's the idea, at least, I think. Lagiacrus skeleton issues and the prototype ancient forest. Much like in my previous iceberg video, the Leviathan skeleton issues and the prototype ancient forest kinda go hand in hand, because without the prototype footage, there would be far fewer questions about Leviathans in World, or absence from World, I should say. The prototype came to light as a video was released shortly after World that demonstrated a very early build of the ancient forest. It shows footage of a hunter running and hiding from an Anjanath throughout the map. They slowly climb all the way up to what would eventually become the Wyvern Nest and are sent plummeting down the waterfall. Once at the bottom, the hunter watches as the Anjanath is promptly snapped up by a Lagiacrus bursting up from the water down below, thus showing that very early on in development, Lagiacrus was intended to be in the game. You may notice that in fact it is not in World, nor are any other Leviathans at all. The long and short of it is that the Leviathans of the time, particularly Lagiacrus, were too long and too low to the ground to properly navigate and interact with the terrain and physics system developed for World, requiring a crazy amount of processing power, and were ultimately scrapped. And whilst we do get Leviathans back in Rise, these had a different stance and style to them, aside from Royal Ludroth of course, and Rise's terrain as a whole is far less varied and complex due to the map design. That said, with Lagiacrus taking the third spot in the monster popularity vote, and both Balahara and Uthduna being revealed for Wilds, I reckon
I'm back.
Now might be the perfect time to see our beautiful blue boy return in a big way. The Monster Hunter movie. Alright, so technically there are 2 Monster Hunter movies, so I'll cover them both. The first is the Hollywood one, which the less we talk about, the better, but I will still do it for the sake of content. Directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, you know, the guy who made the almost universally disliked Resident Evil movies? No, I don't know why Capcom keeps trusting this man with their IPs. This one came out in 2020 to pretty mixed to negative reviews. It stars his wife, Mila Jovovich, again, much like the RE films, and follows... Actually, I don't know what it's about because I've never seen it. I suppose I should go and watch it before I trash it too hard.
One eternity later.
Yeah, that shit sucked. It's about like real people devoid of any character ending up in the new world and getting owned by a Diablos, and then getting owned by a bunch of shitty looking Nursilla, and then getting owned by a bunch of Apsaris, and accidentally taking a Rathalos to the real world and getting owned by that, and also Gore Magala is here as well. The visuals are fine, it's cool to see big budget CGI monsters, but god, what a terrible movie. Yet another slam dunk for old mate Mr. Anderson.
Why, Mr. Anderson? Why? Why do you do it?
The second Monster Hunter movie was a direct-to-Netflix animation from 2021 called Monster Hunter Legends of the Guild. This one tells the backstory of Aiden, better known as either the Ace Cadet or the Excitable A-Lister, as he aspires to become a great hunter. It shows us how his mentorship with Julius, the Ace Commander, came to be, and culminates with a showdown with a Lunastra of all monsters. It's neat enough and feels far more like a Monster Hunter story told with a bit of respect for the property. It's certainly not without its flaws though. Far from it. It's got some pretty shoddy animation and some weird character decisions, and it even outright kills 2 of the hunters in the final showdown. Spoilers, sorry. Which is a little bit tonally off from Monster Hunter, but it's a fine enough watch if you want to see a Congalala fight a Devil Joe. Monster Hunter Frontier. The first of 2 MMOs to appear on our list today, Frontier was the more famous one and ran for the longest. It launched in June of 2007 and ran for 12 years before being shut down in December of 2019. It was built on the foundation formed by Monster Hunter DOS and grew over its lifespan to include a huge roster of monsters that have basically never been seen outside of that game, with a few notable exceptions. It had exclusive maps and monsters and elements and even weapons, but it was only playable in Japan, Korea, and China when it was still live, but there were ways around this so people across the world could and did play it. Following it being totally shut down, the fan base continued on and now hosts private servers so that people can still experience this MMO. I've been meaning to do so myself for a while now, just haven't got around to it unfortunately. Monster Hunter Online. Online is the second MMO and was much shorter lived, but also our first glimpse at a high definition Monster Hunter at the time. Developed by Tencent as opposed to in-house at Capcom, it was built on CryEngine 3 and was released in its first beta form in 2013 before a formal launch in December 2016, followed by its eventual closure in December 2019. This game was not quite the behemoth that Frontier was, and was only available in China, but it sure was pretty, and it had an impressive catalogue of unique monsters in its own right. My guess is that due to it being exclusive to China, along with World's worldwide release of a very successful pretty Monster Hunter game, there wasn't much online offered to the casual player base that World wasn't already doing with more success, and so it was unfortunately destined to die. It's a shame really, because it had some cool looking monsters and maps that I doubt we'll see again anytime soon. Monster Hunter Portable 3rd. This game is considered by many older fans to be one of, if not the best Monster Hunter game ever. Monster Hunter Portable 3rd was a Japanese exclusive entry into the portable Monster Hunter series, released back in 2010. Being exclusive to Japan didn't do much to deter invested players though, myself included, as the PSP was not region locked, and as such you could import it and play it wherever you lived. As a result, it somehow managed to become the second best selling PSP game of all time. And not just in Japan either, in the whole wide world, which is pretty insane for a game that's not widely available. It also went on to receive a PS3 port that was also an exclusive. It was the game to introduce fan favourite Zenoga to the series and featured a heavily feudal Japanese-inspired aesthetic with the weapon and armor designs, and of course Yukuma Village itself being the main hub. It was really good, despite the fact that I couldn't read a single word in it when I played it back in the day on account of me not knowing Japanese, but knowing the fundamentals of Monster Hunter does a lot of the heavy lifting, and you can even get an English patch to play through it these days. Monster Hunter Explore. Continuing on with the obscure Monster Hunter titles, let's talk about mobile games. This series has had a few forays into the mobile space over the years, We currently have Monster Hunter Now and Puzzle, but we've also had things like Monster Hunter Freedom Unite and Stories 1 released as mobile ports, along with Monster Hunter I and Dynamic Hunting if you want to go even further back. And we've even got Monster Hunter Outlanders coming out sometime this year. But this entry is about possibly the largest mobile exclusive game of them all, Monster Hunter Explore. Released back in 2015 and exclusive to Japan and Canada of all places, Explore was very much a spin-off, but it had a lot of content. It featured just about every existing mainline monster at the time, as well as some brand new ones, and had players exploring islands as they hunted them down. The controls were streamlined and simplified for mobile, as I understand it, but the biggest draw was the sheer amount of collabs this game had. Just so many collaborations. Evangelion Brachydios and Tigrex and Gormagala, Attack on Titan, Deviljho, Street Fighter, Giginox, you name it, it was there. It seems like a wild ride. I'm just sad that I never got the chance to try it, but alas, it is too late now, as much like the MMOs, it has gone the way of the dinosaurs, I'm afraid, and is dead and gone. Monster Hunter DOS PvP. You heard that right, PvP has indeed existed in Monster Hunter's history. However, think of it less like For Honor and more like Pokemon. Sort of. My basic understanding of this mechanic is that you could catch a monster that would then be yours to use in the arena, where you would go up against another person's monster. The objective was to hunt and slay theirs before they could slay yours, and you could buff it as the hunt went on and do all kinds of little interactive things. Honestly, it seemed pretty cool as a concept, and most likely was at least somewhat influential on the development of Monster Hunter stories, as it certainly bears some similarities. Whilst it'd be neat to see it return, please God never put actual Hunter versus Hunter gameplay into Monster Hunter, because I can't think of anything that would fuck up the feel of the weapons more than trying to have them balanced for PvP. It also just wouldn't make sense in the lore of the game. Copper Blangonga. The Copper Blangonga was a subspecies whose first and so far last appearance was back in Monster Hunter Freedom Unite. For those unfamiliar, Blangonga was a ice element monkey-like monster that behaves much like Rajang does. It's just a little bit lower on the food chain and commands a pack of smaller monsters known as Blango. Whilst subspecies were added to the series in Monster Hunter G, the Copper Blangonga's appearance in Freedom Unite is notable because as a subspecies, it was the first one to properly alter the element, behavior, and habitat of the base monster. Before that, subspecies were definitely different colors to their standard counterparts, but they largely acted as harder versions of the monster, with the same behavior, elements, and maps being used, being more akin to modern variants. Copper Blangonga took an ice element monster, changed its color scheme from white to brown, placed it in the desert, gave it rocks instead of ice to throw, and got rid of its smaller packmates entirely. It was a pretty big turning point for the series in terms of monster design, and paved the way for many more interesting subspecies in the future. Dundorma is constantly attacked by elder dragons. Dundorma is a fairly prevalent town in the old lore of Monster Hunter, and has had several iterations throughout the series. It is the main online hub for Monster Hunter DOS, and you visit it as part of the story in the 4th generation. It is also featured as a quest location known as the Town in Freedom Unite, where you will almost always be fighting some form of elder dragon or other giant monster, because elder dragons and giant monsters just absolutely love obliterating Dundorma. It's a little bit unclear why this is, but it makes for a compelling case to not ever live there at all, ever. It could be because it's very close to Castle Shrade, and Fatalis is getting all these monsters riled up. It could be that the people of Dundorma are just particularly tasty to Elder Dragons. It could even be that it's in the flight path of the Elder Crossing. Who knows, just do yourself a favor and don't move to Dundorma. Apex Triple Meaning. The localization of the Monster Hunter series is pretty solid, particularly when it comes to the cat puns, but at times it could certainly use some work and some more consistency. Throughout the series' 20-year lifespan, the term Apex has been used to describe 3 completely different things, so it can be a little bit confusing and is a bit of a meme in the community as well. The first official use of Apex was a group of monsters in Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate who were afflicted by the Frenzy virus, but managed to overcome it and use that virus to empower themselves. This sent these monsters into the Apex state, which would have them exude a sickly black aura, grow in size, and feature glowing red eyes, and they're basically just insanely powerful versions of the regular monster. The Apex state, as it was called, has only been recorded in the following monsters: Deviljho, Diablos, Gravios, Rajang, Ceregios, Tidal Najarala, Tigrex, and Zenoga. The second use of Apex is less explicit, but is referring to the strongest monster in a given ecosystem in Monster Hunter World. Each map tends to have a food chain in World, with a particular monster being the apex predator of that ecosystem, or just a big herbivore not to be messed with in one case. For the Ancient Forest, it's the Rathalos, Wildspire Waste has the Diablos, Coal Highlands has Legiana, the Rotten Vale has Otogaron, and Elder's Recess has, I guess Lavasioth? This is all not including Elder Dragons, of course. As of Monster Hunter Wilds, this feature is far more explicit, as a region's apex monster specifically appears alongside the weather events that overtake those maps. As of the recording of this video, the Wilds apex monsters we know of right now are Raydal, Uthduna, and the Black Flame. Then the third use of apex is for the forms we see in Monster Hunter Rise. These are the weakest conceptually in my opinion, being created when the regular monster survives the storm surrounding the rampage and battles with other monsters, and then becomes the apex monster with big strong superpowers, or something like that. There's only a handful of these: Azeroth, Rathian, Mizitsune, Rathalos, Diablos, and Zenoga, and they are effectively just reskins of the much cooler deviants, which we spoke about earlier. 2 teams. This one refers to the split development of the Monster Hunter series between portable and mainline titles. This is a loose term, particularly as of late, as the distinction between portable and mainline is basically gone as of Generation 5, but yes, there are 2 teams internally at Capcom that develop Monster Hunter games, with one working on the next major console release, and the other working on the portable / Freedom / Generation series, and also Rise, which is basically just Freedom 5. Each team is not exclusive to making only console or portable games. The entire 4th generation was on portable consoles after all, and my understanding is that they don't work in a vacuum either. There is overlap between them, and I imagine this helps with consistency and coherency throughout the series. Rathalos and Rathian redesigns. As the default faces of this franchise, Rathalos and Rathian have been around for a good long while, and they've appeared in just about every iteration of the series to date in some shape or form. As such, it's only natural that they received a few updates over the last 20 years to bring them in line with the evolving art style, graphical upgrades, and design motifs. Originally, they looked like this, which in my opinion were actually pretty sick monster designs for 2004, but as time went on, it was apparent that they needed some more love. In Monster Hunter Tri, these 2, along with Diablos, were the only returning monsters in the game, as the vast majority of the roster was brand new designs. Given the moderate upgrade in visual style and fidelity, sort of, it was still a Wii game after all, these returning monsters got a fresh coat of paint as well, with Rathian and Rathalos being the most notable. With these remodels, they also received slight design changes. Of particular note were the designs of their feet to be more realistic for a creature that would fly down and grab onto prey and hold it as it flew away, and the size of their wings, giving them a far more believable wingspan. They're also more vibrantly coloured due to the art style of the 3rd generation, and they introduced the updated posture for flying wyverns moving forward, where they hold their heads lower to the ground and their tails higher in the air to balance, whereas previously they just sort of were very horizontal. They also obviously get their redesigns in Monster Hunter World as well, along with every other returning monster to bring them into the modern age, though these changes were more just improved graphics rather than changes to their physiology. They didn't get any brand new features like how Yian Garuga got its wings just completely changed. Steve. This is a good little meme, and there's a little bit of community lore behind this one. Steve is the fan name given to Ceregios, the flagship monster of Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate that appeared in Sunbreak, and it's a name that has persisted since it was released, but where did that name come from? Well, originally back when Ceregios was teased before its official name was revealed, a fan asked what its name was in the comments section of the teaser trailer. Then Capcom Unity guy turned community manager Yuri replied to this fan by simply saying, Steve, and the name just stuck. I'm pretty sure Yuri has since moved on to bigger and brighter things, but his legacy will always live on through Steve. Hyper monsters. Most Monster Hunter games have some form of mechanic that gives us empowered versions of monsters to fight as the endgame. Sunbreak had the Affliction, World had tempered and arc-tempered monsters, and the Generations games had the Hyper State. This was a phenomenon that made monsters very aggressive and much stronger. They would also have sections of their bodies that would glow with this red-black mist, and attacks using these glowing parts would be empowered, do more damage, come out way faster, or have a larger area of effect. The mist would move to different parts of the body over time, changing the fight on the go, and attacking the glowing section would yield additional juice for your Hunter Art gauge, which were basically the precursor to Wirebugs in Rise. In short, hyper monsters have more health, deal more damage, become enraged more easily, and do not run out of stamina. Area themes are monster themes. This should be a pretty clear point to anyone who participated in the recent community poll for the best Monster Hunter theme, where you would have noticed that a lot of the monsters don't have a unique theme, but rather share theirs with many others. The themes in question, though, are sometimes still named after the primary monster that it represents. For example, the theme Raw Rathalos is used for many monsters in the Forest and Hills map of the original Monster Hunter game, but first and foremost, it is the Rathalos' own theme. hence the name. You can even hear some iteration of it in the newer games in its intro cutscene. This is seen in Gen 3 as well, with the theme Tremble of the Sea and Land being mainly recognized as Lagiacrus's theme, but also being used as the Deserted Island generic theme as well. It wasn't until later on in Gen 3 and beyond where we started to get very specific themes for large monsters, and even then, it's not a guarantee as we saw in Monster Hunter World. Hot Fish. This one definitely took some digging, but I think I figured out what it's referring to. It's an inside joke in the community, one I had not heard of before personally, but it references the lyrics that can be heard in the old Fatalis theme, very clearly saying, get me hot fish, bless me hot fish, put some salsa on the hot fish. Here, let's have a listen together. Marvelous stuff. False lore. This entry is a tricky one because I'm unsure if this is referencing a particular event that happened or just the general misinformation that circulates around the community with regards to canon lore. The lore of Monster Hunter is very rich and very interesting for those that care to seek it out, because rarely is it actually explicitly and overtly included in the games as opposed to being in supplementary material like the art books. But this ultimately makes for a lot of speculation in the general community because it's not that available. People spread misinformation on forum posts. They get things wrong in videos. Myself included. In fact, I've probably gotten something wrong in this very video you're watching right now. Or they just genuinely interpret something as canon when it isn't. It happens, and every now and then, it spreads like wildfire. Some of the more prevalent examples of false lore are the Equal Dragon weapon being confirmed canon, and the Yarn Garuga being a Rathian Kutku hybrid. Souls-like. I think that this has floated around a bit for a while, particularly as a result of Monster Hunter World's success, but every now and then someone calls Monster Hunter a Souls-like, and everybody else collectively loses their mind. As for me, I can see the similarities: third-person fantasy setting, high skill ceiling, big dragons and monsters that seem utterly beyond your means as a little human. There's certainly overlap in the theming and gameplay department, and I would hazard a guess that most people who like one series would like the other. I know I sure do, but to call Monster Hunter a Souls-like is to misunderstand both series in my opinion. There's a lot of differences between them, but the main things are things like the gameplay feel, the core loop of the game, and the settings. Monster Hunter is a more action-focused, quest-based resource management game with a naturalistic world, and Dark Souls and the other FromSoft games are very dark fantasy, gothic masterpieces focused on exploration and rich world building. They're both great, don't get me wrong, but they sure are not the same. Frontier monsters in the main series. As of right now, there are 3 monsters that fit the bill as frontier monsters that have made their way into the main series. These 3 are the Hypnocatrice, the Lavasioth, and the Espinas. Both Hypnocatrice and Lavasioth debuted in Frontier first, and then showed up in Freedom Unite, with Hypnocatrice being exclusive to that game as of the recording of this video, and Lavasioth going on to become a series regular, even being in the Eldest Recess in World. It should be noted that whilst they technically are in Frontier first, their appearance in Freedom Unite was planned for quite some time, and these 2 were designed in tandem between the 2 teams, with concepts being found in the Gen 1 art books. Espinas is a different story though. Whilst I've heard it been said that it was also planned for Freedom Unite, Espinas would not see the main series until 14 years later when it was added in Sunbreak. I particularly love how Espinas looks, feels, and fights in Sunbreak, and I do wish for more frontier monsters to grace us with their presence in the future. Whether that's a pipe dream or not, only time will tell. Monster Hunter PS2 controls. Though there aren't too many people who have played the PS2 Monster Hunter games, their legacy is well known. Of the quirks and qualities that they have, few are as infamous as the control scheme. Whilst I'm unsure about Monster Hunter DOS, I can tell you from experience that the first Monster Hunter was a wild ride. The main difference between it and just about every single other action game I've ever played is the camera and combat controls. The camera is used purely with the D-pad, locking it into different camera angles as you tap a button in each direction, and you may be thinking, why not just use the right analog stick? Ah, well, of course, that is for attacking. Pulling the right stick in different directions would prompt a different attack that actually felt pretty organic. It was pretty intuitive. For example, when you use the greatsword, pushing it forward would do a big overhead swing, pushing it to the side would do the side spin, and pulling it backwards would do the backswing. It was actually pretty cool, and it did a great job to set Monster Hunter apart from other games back then, but I am glad it's gone though. I think that it could have single-handedly alienated a lot of players from the series and sort of kneecapped its success to a degree. Puke isn't a chameleon. Puke is a peculiar little monster that was introduced in Monster Hunter World. At first glance, it can be a bit tricky to tell what exactly it's supposed to be, and I think that its design inspirations are varied and cast a wider net than just this thing is a chameleon. That said, it does indeed feature some elements reminiscent of a chameleon. Its eyes can move independently of one another, it can partially change the color of its face, its tail is sort of prehensile, and it's got zygodactyl feet. But it's also got feathers, wings, and a tongue that's more reminiscent of a frog's or some other amphibian. And that's where the true inspiration comes in. Recently I made a video about bird wyverns, and I said that Puke is not much of a bird, and then the comment section pointed out that he's probably based on a literal translation of a tawny frogmouth. An Australian bird that I often see sitting outside my window, because I live in Australia. I should have been all over this comparison, but somehow I just wasn't. So yeah, that's my interpretation now as well. Puke takes the concept of a tawny frogmouth and really leans into the frog part of the name and brings it all together with some chameleon traits. And I like it more now as a result, I must say. Also, it can't just be a chameleon because Chameleos is already the best chameleon monster hands down. Movie Nursilla redesign. I don't know why they bothered putting Nursilla in this movie at all, if they were just going to change so much about it. For those unacquainted, we spoke about Nursilla earlier in the video with the Gypsaris that are found hanging in the sunken hollow. This thing is a badass. They are absolutely huge, bright white with blue eyes, draped in purple Gypsaris skin, and giant spikes coming out of their back. And need I remind you of the retractable mandibles. So what the hell is this thing? Abysmal. Tragic. Terrible. This thing looks like generic Spider Mob 3 from any MMO released in the last 2 decades. Why did they do this? Just ugh. False subspecies. As mentioned in the Black Diablos section, there are a few monsters that are classified as subspecies in-game that are not genetically different from the normal version of the monster, and these are referred to colloquially as false subspecies. As for why this is, I think it's probably because the classifications and texts that we read are written from the perspective of characters in-universe. These people don't have complex genetics and all that jazz, it's a different world to ours. They operate under assumptions and observations that allows researchers and in turn hunters to easily navigate the world and complete their quests as safely as possible. And as such, the lines tend to be blurred between the different monster classifications.
I was here in the Monster Hunter and I was drawing a bit.
And variations. Given that fact, subspecies should more so be thought of as a label to signify that the hunter can...
I need to claim some things here. They don't fit well to me. This finger is not appealing to me. This looks better for me. Welcome. I'm just finishing my art. I'm going to sleep in a moment. This is for a challenge of a friend. I think I need to clean this. This part is not necessary. Here and here. Okay. With this in mind, I think I can say I finished my work. Oh man, making a drawing is hard, but I had so much fun doing it. And I was seeing my stream, my video. So I think I don't need this anymore. I was wrong all this time. Sorry for being quiet. But I think I'm going to sleep right now. Thank you so much for all the people who came here, who talked, who said something. I really appreciate everything. And thanks for coming here. I'm going to sleep. Bye bye.